if it cannot recruit more staff and pay them better. And this hour,
I do this once a week. 70% of the time there's delays and problems.
Travel chaos in the northwest today after a major power failure in the Greater Manchester area. We'll get you all the latest news and ask, how are you going to devolve power to the regions if you can't keep the literal power on in the regions?
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 7 o'clock, major disruption is expected on trains across Greater Manchester and the northwest of England for the rest of the day. National Rail says it's because of an electrical supply failure at a communications centre. LBC's Northwest reporter Liam Gotting has been speaking to passengers at Manchester Piccadilly Station.
We're actually trying to get to Bradford, but they've told us the only place we can get to, the only train that's running, is to Sheffield.
I do this once a week back to Maidstone, Kent from here, and I reckon 70% of the time there's delays.
I'm just a bit confused, really. I'm just trying to get back locally to Congleton, but the train's disappeared, so...
So you've not even got that far to go, have you?
No, I haven't really. I could probably walk it faster.
Meanwhile, one runway has been closed at Heathrow due to a grass fire. All flights were grounded earlier. People are being told to check before they travel. Andy Burnham has personally intervened to stop grooming gang members from being eligible for early release. Concerns have been raised about the scope of exemptions for rapists and serious child sex offenders, which may not go far enough. 5,000 inmates are due to be released under measures to ease prison overcrowding. A farmer from Barnsley has been sentenced to a minimum of 35 years in prison for murdering his lodger. Christopher Wright shot dead Richard Dyson, who was 55, in 2019 before hiding his body in a barrel for 6 years. The 73-year-old was arrested after detectives were told they'd had a row about guns. Andy Knowles was the senior investigating officer on the case.
The investigation into Richard's disappearance and death has been long, complex and emotionally draining. Their strength and dignity in confronting each moment of this process has been nothing short of extraordinary.
2 people have been arrested after police officers were taken to hospital during anti-immigration protests in Thetford. Norfolk Police says significant resources had to be deployed to a second night of disorder. One officer needed treatment after being bitten, while the other was hit with a rock. And EasyJet has agreed to a £5.7 billion takeover by a private equity firm. The US investor Apollo, which also owns Wagamama, won a bidding war after its rival Castle Lake withdrew. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 20 points at 10,867. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.16. LBC weather, mostly dry with clear spells tonight. Showers in Wales and the northwest with heavier rain for Scotland, a low of 4. Mostly dry with sunny spells tomorrow. A few showers in Wales and northern England and more rain in northwest Scotland. Highs of 23 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Simon Marks.
Good evening, everyone, again. I'm in for Ian Dale tonight and all next week, in fact, here on LBC. We've got a very busy night ahead, whether you are listening to us on the radio or your mobile, watching us on the LBC official YouTube channel, the Global app or the LBC app. At 9 tonight, we're going to talk about pubs and efforts by Westminster City Council in London today to recommend no longer allowing vertical drinking. In other words, drinking while you're standing up or even ordering while standing at the bar. The Mayor of London calls it a restrictive and anti-growth policy, but the council says it just wants to bring a bit more order to crowded, loud venues where drinkers often spill out onto the pavement. If you're a publican, it's got to be the last thing you need to hear, isn't it? If you live near a pub, maybe you welcome the idea. We'll talk about it after 9. At 8, back to the prisons crisis. And tonight, the problem of finding staff to fix it. If you are out of work, would you be willing to take a job in the prison or probation service? We'll listen back to a very moving call that we took last night from one LBC listener who has worked as a prison officer for the last decade. But this hour, major travel disruption today on the railways across large parts of the northwest, and what it tells us about infrastructure issues that the country urgently needs to confront. A power supply failure in the Ardwick area of Manchester brought significant portions of the rail network to a standstill, taking down the signalling system, affecting Network Rail's regional operating centre, with TransPennine Express saying at one stage that trains were unable to run safely because of a failure of the communications system on the network. Manchester, Birmingham, New Street, Crewe and many other locations have been affected, and all of this comes, of course, after last year's catastrophic loss of power at Heathrow Airport caused by a fire in a substation that led to the airport's closure. Gatwick, only a few days ago, lost all running water after a power failure at a treatment works. If you've been caught up in today's disruption, we'd like to hear about your experiences. I know many of you are probably going to tell me that this is not the first time you've turned to the railway, maybe instead of hopping into a car, and found that it let you down. And the fact that Manchester was very much in the eye of today's storm, I think can also not be entirely lost on us. Given that were Andy Burnham not taking a holiday break, he might have been planning to travel there himself to spend another day at number 10 North. These power failures, whether they are at Heathrow, Gatwick or today affecting train passengers all over the Pennines, are surely a reminder of just how much work we have ahead of us to create a national infrastructure that is reliable, especially at a time where we're thinking of starting to build data centres that are going to rely on even more power that the national grid will be called on to provide. Tell me your stories of trying to deal with infrastructure failure today, and if you weren't affected by today's disruption up in the north of the country, what infrastructure issues constantly get in your way wherever you are? Stuff that you think urgently needs to be addressed and perhaps has gone on far too long without being addressed. Shouldn't infrastructure repair be one of the central pillars of the government's plans, arguably before we get to stuff like the reindustrialisation of Britain, the creation of a written constitution and the need to devolve more power to the regions? After all, you can send power to the regions, but if the regions today, at least one of them, could not access some literal power to keep the trains running, there has to be a bigger conversation to be had, hasn't there? So let's have it. You can call me at 0345 6060 973. Same number for WhatsApp that it is for the phones. You can text 84850. What nagging infrastructure issues in your neck of the woods drive you crazy and you think the government ought, as a priority, to start addressing? Let's begin by catching up on the latest news about the travel disruption that has played out over the course of the last few hours. We're going to talk to two of LBC's reporters on the scene this evening. First of all, our northwest of England correspondent, Liam Gotting. Liam, you are at Manchester Piccadilly railway station. How are things there as the rush hour comes to an end? Good evening.
Yeah, good evening, Simon. Well, certainly the chaos of the last couple of hours has subsided a little bit here, but certainly still a lot of would-be passengers stood around me right now, looking up at the screens above our heads, looking at the empty black slots where the expected departure times would usually sit. But many people here staring at their phones, trying to find new ways to get home. And there's still a queue about a mile long outside Manchester Piccadilly here, with people waiting for rail replacement buses. I've spoken to just some of the people who are currently stranded here at Piccadilly.
It's just a bit tough, isn't it? I was just on a train and said it was going to Euston, and then it stopped, and then it's going back to depot now, so I had to jump off it. The only one that's leaving is platform 6, but it's already jammed.
I'm so surprised that if there's no trains, why have we not put buses on to get us home?
Where are you trying to get to?
The capital of the north, which is Preston.
How are you feeling right now?
Excited for all the bars that are open in Manchester. There's plenty to go at.
You might be looking for a hotel tonight, possibly.
Absolutely.
Well, according to National Rail, multiple rail companies are affected and have issued do not travel notices, including Avanti West Coast, East Midlands Railway, Northern Rail, TransPennine Express, Transport for Wales, Lumo and London North Western Railway. A statement from Transport for Greater Manchester says due to a power failure at the Manchester Rail Operating Centre, there is major disruption on the rail networks, across Greater Manchester, the North West of England and the Midlands, and that could possibly last for the rest of the day. Well, my colleague up in Yorkshire, Alex Taylor-Brown, is at Leeds train station and can give us more of the picture up there. Alex.
Yeah, some disruption to services, particularly heading towards the northwest from Leeds this evening. It's those heading towards Manchester and on those Liverpool lines as well. And as Liam was saying there, TransPennine Express, Northern Rail as well, telling people not to use their services, but they can use cross-country LMER and some northern services around Sheffield, Doncaster and Leeds. That's from a Yorkshire perspective. East Midlands Rail commuters as well being advised not to travel between Sheffield and Liverpool Lime Street. Buses are being put on from Sheffield to Manchester as well, but compared to what's happening in the northwest, it's not on the same scale, but it is causing some disruption. And like I say, it's that getting to the northwest that's causing people issues, like this woman I spoke to earlier who works in Leeds.
Just trying to get back home to Warrington, so I might have to go up to Preston and then double back.
Yeah, where have you been today? Where are you? Is it just Leeds or?
Yeah, the office is in Leeds for the company I work for. So yeah, just trying to get back now.
So you're going to try and get to Preston, did you say?
Back to Newton Willows.
And how much time is that going to add on?
I'm not going to get home till gone 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
Literally got to the station and found out. So yeah, it's not ideal, but I'm just hoping they start running sooner rather than later.
Yeah. What's the sort of communication been like?
Well, I've just gone to the desk and they've directed me of how to potentially get home.
Yeah.
So other than that, that's it.
And the scene at Leeds train station, Simon, a bit of crowding around at the departure boards, as you can imagine. Some commuters telling me other services are busier than usual because people are trying to find alternative routes. The Transport Secretary, Heidi Alexander, saying she's receiving regular updates and is urging people to check before they travel. But yeah, some disruption here in Leeds. And it calls into question, you mentioned about infrastructure, Simon, as well. What does this all mean? I mean, here from a Yorkshire perspective, we've had the White Rose Agreement calling from the Northern Mayors for the full Northern Powerhouse Rail to be delivered, faster, reliable services between Leeds and Sheffield. I mean, it's about 30-40 miles between Leeds and Sheffield, but it can take over an hour on the train to get between the two cities. If you on the Yorkshire coast as well, between Whitby and Scarborough, they're just down the coast from each other, but that can take 4 hours on the train because you've got to go to York first and then find the right connection. So it does call into question, like you say, about infrastructure and the reliability, and that's certainly affecting people here tonight.
I mean, those numbers that you've just, those illustrations you've just given us, Alex, those are just extraordinary, really. 2026, and it takes 4 hours to get from Whitby to Scarborough. This all started at about 2 o'clock this afternoon. Is there any indication yet from National Rail as to what might have caused this power failure, or is it just too early to know?
I believe it's too early to know. And, as we talk about what can government do, obviously Andy Burnham has spoken more about taking some of these, private sectors into public ownership, like the rail network and, Great British Rail, that it will improve things. There are always obviously going to be things that are unforeseen, and we wait to see whether this could be one of those as well. But Andy Burnham has said the government should take greater control of the rail system. And we mentioned about the mayors as well, giving them more devolved powers worth up to £500 million for transport projects, because they know what that money needs to go into and they know where the problems are. Lots of the mayors, particularly here in Yorkshire, do use public transport and they know where those issues lie. So hopefully, you would imagine Andy Burnham, who's obviously recently been the Mayor of Greater Manchester, can take that into the Prime Ministerialship and knows where the teething problems are.
Alex Taylor-Brown, LBC's Yorkshire correspondent, joining us live from Leeds railway station. And before that, we heard from Liam Gotting, LBC's reporter, live at Manchester Piccadilly. We're going to keep an eye on the evening as it plays out to see just how soon or how long it's going to be before normal service returns. And maybe even that concept of normal service fills some of you with dread, because even when things are normally running, as Alex was indicating there, it can still take, because of underinvestment and underdevelopment, an enormously long period of time to travel a relatively short distance. I want to broaden the scope of this conversation, as I indicated, and talk this evening about infrastructure. Because you can, of course, there can always be unforeseen events that spark disruption on all sorts of areas of the public transportation network. But we've seen this today. We saw the power failure at Heathrow last year caused by a substation fire. We saw Gatwick this just a few days ago. No running water anywhere at Gatwick Airport again because of a power failure. What does all this tell us about the country's infrastructure and the need for its repair, replacement and development really to be prioritised by this new government? If you want to reindustrialise, as Andy Burnham has said, if you want to grow the economy, as Andy Burnham has said, you've got to have a reliable infrastructure, because if you don't, you're constantly going to get tripped up by the events that have disrupted so many railway passengers up in the northwest and on both sides of the Pennines over the last few hours. Call me at 0345 6060 973. Same number for WhatsApp that it is for the phones. You can text 84850. It is 16 minutes past 7.
Ben Kentish from 10 p.m.
As Andy Burnham announces 160 new mental health centres will open across the country. What most helped you when you were struggling? Your calls on that to come, plus details of a major new immigration announcement from the Tories, and fury today after Westminster Council launches a crackdown on people standing up in pubs. The Prime Minister says it's an attack on the British way of life. But what do you think?
Ben Kentish from 10 p.m. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Us kids are mesmerised by the mundane, entranced by the everyday. Where grown-ups see a snail, we see a slippery shelled beast from the undergrowth. But around 1 in 5 young children have a sight condition that can get in the way of all that wonder. The good news is, if these are found early, they can be managed or corrected. So book your child a free eye test at Specsavers today. Find out more at specsavers.co.uk/kids tests.
Hi, Mum. Cornwall is absolutely stunning. We love it here. Of course, our Lee thought he was too tough for sun cream and got sunburnt immediately.
Have you put on your sun cream?
Oh, he never learns. On the bright side, children's bus travel is free. So we've been riding him around everywhere to keep this lobster out of the sun. And we found this brilliant beach where we even saw a seal. Miss you tons. Love, Sally.
Enjoy great British summer savings, such as free bus travel for children this August. Funded by the UK government.
Look, there's a snail, and its eyes are sticking out of its antlers. It looks like an ice cream.
Ella sees a lot more than just a snail. With free kids' glasses from Specsavers, plus a second pair from £10, they'll see a world of wonders. And you'll see a great deal too. So book them an appointment at Specsavers today for free. £10 second pair with free glasses from our £65 and above range.
Conditions apply. See online for details.
Simon Marks on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Or you can text 84850. Turner has texted the programme to say of the travel disruption and the power failure that has taken place up in the northwest on the railway system today. This all seems a bit Mickey Mouse. Any hub like this should have backup generators controlled by an inverter to automatically switch to generator power in the event of a failure. And Turner, you're making a very important point, and there is indeed a backup system on that section of the railway, and for reasons that Network Rail have not yet explained, it did not kick in today. So one can argue that the main branch of the system needs to be fixed, but maybe the redundancy that was built in to take over from the main branch then also became a problem. All of this, I think, underscoring the issues with infrastructure that the country is grappling with, particularly in regions where Andy Burnham, as you know, is planning to devolve a greater degree of power and also a greater degree of resources. What I want to hear from you tonight is, in a way, what drives you crazy in your daily life as you try to get to a meeting, get to work on time, travel for whatever reason it happens to be, business or pleasure. What infrastructure failures constantly trip you up, and as a result of tripping you up, are making it less likely that on that particular day you are going to be economically productive in a way that helps the national economy and helps the country to grow. Call me at 0345 6060 973. Let's kick off with Martin in Doncaster. Good evening, Martin. What's it like up in Doncaster?
Yeah, I'm ringing up about the buses in Doncaster, Simon. It's a terrible service, really. I live about 8 miles outside Doncaster, and on some mornings it can take you nearly an hour to get to town. And it was like one day last week. I live in a village called Stainford, and where the supermarket is, it's about 1.5 miles away from the from where I live. And because I had a bit of shopping with my partner last week, I had to get the bus back because I had too much shopping. So anyway, my original bus didn't turn up. So then I waited an hour and 10 minutes just to get home, and it was only a mile from my home. Oh. You know what I mean?
And Martin, is that hour and 10 minutes, is that the timetable, or is the timetable a work of fiction?
It's generally about 30-35 minutes per bus to come. There's about 2 an hour, roughly, in our area. It's like sometimes, Simon, we go to Bridlington and we get a minibus to Bridlington from Doncaster, from where we are in our village, Stainford, and it's about 65 miles. And it takes us roughly an hour and 20 minutes to get to Bridlington. And then, like I say, sometimes it can take nearly an hour.
It can take you almost that long just to get 1 mile, the last mile can take you almost that long. I take it you've lived there for a long while, Martin?
Yeah, I've lived in Doncaster all my life, but I've moved up to this village about 8 years ago. It's a lovely village, you know what I mean? It's a proper, like, where we are, it's like a lot of travelling people, and I tell you what, they're absolutely fantastic.
And in terms of public transport infrastructure, has it always been like this? Has there always been a sense in which you think you've been underserved, or have things deteriorated over time?
I'd say we're being underserved where we're living now. Where I lived a few years ago in Woodlands in Doncaster, there was more. It wasn't so far to travel. But my mum says even the buses around her area have got a lot worse now. Also, what they did with our bus service just over a year ago, they changed the service where there was like an 87 bus and an 87A. So what they did, they took this 87A, so that give us like 4 buses an hour, and they put an 84 bus on. And the 84 bus you can't really catch. It doesn't go our way. So and also, Simon, it's the prices as well. It's like, if there's 2 of us going into town, it's £13 on the bus, and that's return. And it's like, we was going to go to Bridlington the other day on the train, because we haven't been on the minibus this year. And if we went to Bridlington on the train, it's like £60 for 2 of us.
Crazy.
And that's £60 before you even get to Bridlington.
Because, Martin, I think in many ways this conversation that we're having, with me being in London and you being in Doncaster, Andy Burnham would say it is the poster child for the improvements that he wants to make. I grew up in London, and when I was a kid, and I use the same bus today that I used 50 years ago when I was a kid going to school. And 50 years ago, if I missed that bus to take me home from school, it would be 45 minutes until another bus came. Minimum, guaranteed. And that was the timetable. Today, because the public transportation infrastructure has had so much investment and has been improved so much in London, that same bus route, usually like clockwork, every 8 minutes, there'll be another one along. A little bit longer at the weekends, but not much longer, maybe 10, maybe 12 minutes sometimes. And yet, so in my neck of the woods in London, I've seen that extraordinary development and shift and change. I can get from northwest London right here to LBC in Leicester Square, door to door in 30 minutes if I time it all properly. And yet you in Doncaster, and I'm sure many other listeners all over the northern part of England, relate to the story that you're telling me, which is that the kind of improvements we've seen in London simply have not been matched by what other parts of the country are seeing. And that's really what Andy Burnham's talking about.
Can I just say something along that time? And we went to Manchester about a month ago. We went to see a concert. And luckily enough, we've got a fantastic train service because Doncaster is one of the main train stations within the country because there's a lot of London trains go that way, and there's a lot of Scotland. It's a really busy train station. So, and then, anyway, it took us. It's like there's only about 3 stops from Doncaster to Manchester if you go Stockport way, and it is really good. But if you notice, when we go to Manchester, the skyline, the building work that's gone off, it's amazing now. Like Birmingham, there's buildings going up all over. If you leave Doncaster, go to see Sheffield and see Sheffield skyline, and there's apart from tall flat, you can see the investment is just not there, Simon. There's been, you can see there's no like big buildings going up like there is in Manchester and Birmingham. It's like what you just said about investment.
And so do you have hope that under Burnham's proposed plans to devolve resources, and it's not just devolving power, he wants to devolve resources as well, do you hope that you are going to see investment, or are you going to believe it when you see it?
Well, we need investment around Doncaster. We were made a city a couple of years ago when the Queen announced new city. We got city status. But when we go to Manchester, you can go around the city centre at 6 o'clock. There's tens of thousands of people still leaving the shop. You go around Doncaster, even on a Saturday, we used to have a fantastic market. The city centre is on its knees. There's nobody about anymore. And it's such a shame. We've got a lovely place. We've got a lovely race course and football stadiums, and we've got some really nice places. And I just hope if Andy Burnham does invest, I know you've got to invest in South as well, but I look at places like London, I think, wow, and the prices on the buses, and I think you can get a bus for £1.80 something. And
£1.75,
we're paying like £3, and like for two of us, £3 each journey, so it's like £6 round trip, £12 round trip, and I hope Andy Burnham thinks about other places outside Manchester.
Well, I mean, he definitely says that he is, Martin, and I hope that on his list is Doncaster for you and your loved ones. Thanks very much indeed for calling the programme. That was Martin in Doncaster. Tony has texted in to say, South West Rail is hopeless and there's a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. He describes it as wrecking this country's economy. And Tony's text is a reminder that I'm not just talking here, and I don't only want to hear from listeners in the north. I'd love to hear from some listeners in the southwest or the southeast about infrastructure issues that trouble you on a daily basis. Let's go to Chris, who is in Wigan tonight. And Chris, I believe you have been caught up in the disruption today. Good evening.
Good evening, Simon. Yeah, I've been travelling back from Manchester to Wigan this evening for work. Luckily, I've been able to make it in time, but it's just the same old story. We've had this for 30 years that we need rail investment in the north. We need investment in travel in the north. We need just general investment in the north. And every time it's announced, there's a big party, big hurrah, and then 3 months later, 6 months later, it's all cancelled. It's all rolled back. It's all cut down from the sides, and we've just forgotten again. We have got the most congested corridor in Europe, in the Castleville corridor, and there's been arguments for at least 30 years that I'm aware of about widening and expanding tracks and making changes, and it never happens. The investment continues to be plumbed into the southeast and into the south, and I appreciate that there has been investment in Greater Manchester earlier, but it's not to the level that we need and that we've been crying out for 30 years.
If I say to you, Chris, HS2, what do you say to me?
It's not relevant to us in the north because it's been cancelled umpteen times. I live 5 minutes from Goulburn, where there was meant to be the connection to HS2, just south of Goulburn, and brilliant. Andy's got us when he was the mayor. He got Goulburn Station to be reopened, and that's looking at reopening in 2027. But where's the expansion for the West Coast Main Line that is needed? Because it's full. We can't get around the UK as a northerner. We just can't get around the UK.
And Chris, can I ask you, I'm not sure what line of work you may be in, but in your daily life, disruptions like the one that you experience today, how much of a crimp do they put in your ability to rely on getting to work, conducting business, contributing to the economy?
I think the fact that we have such an antiquated rail system up here does affect the economy massively. Personally, it doesn't. I work in hospitality, so it doesn't massively affect me. If I can't get into work, there's always somebody else who'll go into the shift, because hospitality sector is like that. But personally, I've lost out on shifts because I can't get there. Previously, before we had the B network up in Greater Manchester, a lot of services that ran direct to the likes of Manchester, Liverpool, from Wigan have been cut. We don't have those services anymore because we were told to rely on a train service that would improve, that hasn't improved and has gone backwards.
Chris, thanks very much for calling the programme. I'm glad that you made it. You were able to complete your journey without any catastrophe this afternoon. That's Chris in Wigan. I think really underscoring the point that Andy Burnham certainly makes in his book, Head North, where he talks about his tremendous disappointment at the announcement, for example, that HS2 was not going to be extended all the way along the lines of its original plan, and his determination to try and turn things around. But where do you start with crumbling infrastructure that at any point can disrupt rail journeys all over the northwest, can close Heathrow Airport, can leave Gatwick without running water? Call me at 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. After the headlines, there are new statistics out today showing that a record number of people were referred to the Counter-Extremism Prevent programme in the last year. And within that surge in referrals, the most common age group of the people concerned was 11 to 15-year-olds. We're going to explore why that might be the case and what can be done about it next. But now, with the time at 27 minutes to 8, the news headlines from Amelia Cox.
Rail passengers in Greater Manchester and the northwest of England are facing major disruption due to a power failure. National Rail expects it to continue for the rest of the day. A 73-year-old man has been jailed for a minimum of 35 years for murdering his lodger in Barnsley in 2019. The body of 55-year-old Richard Dyson was stored in a concrete-filled barrel for 6 years. And European football bosses say they still have no confidence in the FIFA president, and their threat to boycott the World Cup remains. That's despite Gianni Infantino scrapping his controversial plan to sell off stakes in the World Cup and issuing an apology. LBC weather, mostly dry with clear spells tonight. Showers in Wales and the northwest with heavier rain for Scotland, a low of 4 degrees.
LBC.
You know that feeling when you're out, something cool happens and you just have to capture it. The new Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 8 gets it. Thanks to its new wide design, content looks and feels so much better. Unfold it for a massive cinematic screen. Close it for perfect reels on the go. No cropping, no missing bits. Just content exactly as it was meant to be seen. Pre-order the new Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 8 on EE for only £54 per month, increasing to £56.50 March 2027 and £59 March 2028. Airtime plan and 48-month device credit agreement required. Subject to status, 18+, credit provided by EE Limited.
Who could you be with Pension Bee? Thousands of customers rate Pension Bee as excellent on Trustpilot. That gives me confidence in my pension provider. Download the app today.
Okay, I want you to close your eyes and think of your car. Now I want you to imagine yourself selling that car and getting a really great price for it. You just got the best offer for your car, like 500,000 other customers. It's not magic, it's motorway. Sell your car for more at motorway.co.uk. 84% of sellers got more than market price for their car, validated against 2 independent sources. Visit motorway.co.uk/claims.
Oh, I needed this trip. Oh, lounging in the sunshine, dipping my toes in the pool.
Oh, sounds lovely. Amalfi Coast, was it?
No, Brockwell Lido, darling.
Unwind by the pool without leaving the city. Thameslink Railway, where every stop is a story.
Simon Marks on LBC. Text 84850.
Which is what John has done in Hartlepool. He says, you will know this living in the US, Simon. Infrastructure hasn't been valued for decades. Airports don't work. Highways cripple the city's budgets after federal funding runs out. But this stuff doesn't get cheaper if you put it off. So it's about taking the hit now and feeling the benefits later. Beth in Inverness has texted in to say, while I agree that infrastructure needs to be upgraded and maintained, I can't help but feel this story is more about national security. She says, it really worries me that there doesn't seem to be an acknowledgement by our government that we are extremely vulnerable to hybrid warfare attacks, and these incidents are always played down. I mean, Beth, I would just say we have no idea what the cause was of this power failure, like literally not a notion at this point. And I think that certainly when Keir Starmer was Prime Minister, the government was absolutely warning people about the scale of possible hybrid assaults on the country. It's too early to know if this might have been the result of one of those or not. But you do raise an important point, I think, about the vulnerability that we have to them. We're going to come back to your calls on Britain's infrastructure in just a moment. But there were some staggering figures today revealing that a record number of people have been referred to Prevent, the government's anti-terrorism programme in England and Wales. Year on year, 39% more people have been referred. So that's for a total of 10,293 referrals. It's the highest number since records began. Now, Prevent, of course, was introduced after the 7/7 terror bombings in London back in 2005, and then it was rolled out nationally the following year. It is a key pillar of the government's anti-terror strategy, and today's figures showed that the largest proportion of referrals over the last year, 36% of them, were for children aged between 11 and 15. Kids, 3,655 of them between the ages of 11 and 15. And if you then add 16 and 17-year-olds into the mix, nearly half the total number of referrals to Prevent was for children aged between 11 and 17. And almost 400 children 10 and under were referred as well. That has got to be telling us that something very wrong is going on socially. What is it? And what are we going to do about it? We're going to start with the what is it. I'm joined by Dr. Duncan Harding, consultant adolescent forensic psychiatrist and author of the book The Criminal Mind. Dr. Harding, thanks very much indeed for coming onto the programme tonight. I mean, I think these figures are absolutely staggering. What is the cause of so many young people now being referred to Prevent? Good evening to you.
Good evening. It is staggering, and the numbers are huge. I suppose what's happened as we all know, over the last couple of years, is that the prevent has become much more in the public consciousness. And I think that given the horrific instances a couple of years ago with the Ruda Bakhani case, he was referred to prevent and it wasn't actioned for whatever reason. I think so we've got increased awareness of that service, but also perhaps professionals working with young people are making more referrals. I think if you look at the numbers, the majority of referrals have from education and the police rather than it being from families. So I think that there's a general increase in the number of referrals to prevent, probably because of perhaps policy changes within institutions, perhaps, but perhaps people just feel that they need to make these referrals because they're worried about the kids. But I think that the increase in the number of kids and the fact that the huge proportion is such young children goes beyond just the uplift. It says something else about these young children. Why on earth are they presenting with these issues which gives us such concern as a society? And what can we do to try and get to the root cause of that? If you're asking the question why, I think that needs to be, there's no easy answer to that. I've got some ideas, but I don't think there's any particular easy answer to why that's happened.
Give me a sense of your ideas, and I'm particularly interested in the role that you think social media might be playing.
Yeah, I think social media, I think you don't have to look far in social media or in the kind of societal zeitgeist to see how split we are as a society. I think there always are splits in society, but really, I think since the pandemic and the explosion of social media and the way that we kind of live in our silos now, a lot of online working, we're in these online worlds, particularly children. And that age of kids is interesting, isn't it? 11 to 15-year-olds, think about the age they would have been through the pandemic. I'm not in any way saying that that's an excuse, but they would have been exposed to lots of social media at that time in these isolated bubbles. And I think that what I find with social media, this confluence of perhaps existential threat for all of us through the pandemic, the sense of lack of control, and then what we can control is our silos of the people we agree with. Like, I'm right, you're wrong. There's these huge divisions in society amongst all of us, amongst adults, and the effect that will have on children will be extreme. And that's, I think, what we're seeing. So, and also with social media is that there's a huge opportunity for people to go down rabbit holes of negativity. They can just really I think things are changing. Hopefully things are going to change in the way our approach to kids on social media. But, they can go into these awful, very dark, violent places, and they can then, just get kind of fixated on violence and go down that very dark pathway, which social media allows, unfortunately.
Dr. Harding, thanks very much indeed for joining us on the programme tonight. Also joining us on the programme tonight, Dr. Amanda Gummer, psychologist specialising in child development, and she is the founder of the goodplayguide.com. And the name of it gives you a hint as to what I'd like to talk to Dr. Gummer about this evening. Dr. Gummer, thanks very much indeed for being on LBC tonight. It's the school holidays. There's an opportunity now for families to get their kids off social media, especially if there are families that are worried about some of their children's activities on social media. And, these numbers of referrals to prevent suggest that must be the case for many thousands of families across the UK. What would you advise families to do to try and redress the balance here? Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. As you said, play is, I think, the silver bullet to a lot of these things. And playing in the community, going down to the playground, having lots of opportunities to have meet with other people from different backgrounds, different areas, different ages, and you just develop that sort of tolerance and acceptance of people who aren't exactly the same as you. It gets rid of that echo chamber effect that we were just talking about. And I think it's so valuable for children to be able to work through some of the issues or the questions they have about how the world works through play. So that can be playing with a little Playmobil figure and figuring out how it feels to be bullied, or feel, and developing those empathy, the imagination, all of that stuff. Kids can do it through play from a very young age. And if we get that right in the early years, we stave off a lot of these problems later on.
I'm so glad you said that, because I think it is so important, because now I think for many families, when they think of play, they automatically think of screens. And there are ways of playing games, and some of these products are now being marketed specifically for families that want to get their kids off the screens and yet still feel as though they're having that kind of interactive game experience.
Yeah, and at the Good Play Guide, we champion the idea of a balanced play diet. And we're not saying never have screens. We're saying use them wisely and engage with your kids with what they're doing in the digital world, but make sure they have lots of the superfood of the play diet, which is the social, imaginative, free, active, child-led play. So the stuff where they're just playing for the sake of playing. They're playing with other people. They're being active. They're getting rid of all that adrenaline and testosterone and cortisol that's coursing around their bodies. And that means they sleep better. It means they eat better. It means everybody's less stressed. And they end up, the next day they're able to face the world head on and be open to new opportunities and less fearful. And it's a virtuous circle if we get it right.
And presumably at this time of year, given the weather as well in most parts of the country, the best thing you can do with the kids is take them to the park, get them to touch some trees, plant their toes in some sand on a beach. I mean, all of that makes a huge difference as well.
Yeah, and I'm part of the Association of Play Industries, and we champion the idea of community play spaces where kids can play away from cars and traffic, play safely, where they can learn risk assessment skills, meet other people. And we've done some research recently that showed that it helps. Playing in playgrounds has a positive impact on children's mental and physical well-being. So it's a bit of a no-brainer, but we just need to give children opportunities to do something other than screen-based activities, and it needs to be fun and engaging and challenging and exciting for them.
And this is the time of year to do it. Dr. Gummer, thank you so much for joining us on the programme tonight. Psychologist specialising in child development and the founder of thegoodplayguide.com. Daniel was listening to that and texted in to say the figures are staggering for the under-16s. They are. It can only be coming from the parents, educational or religious institutions within their communities, and of course social media. And who is funding the non-parental stuff unless the government and law enforcement are far more pervasive in turning this around? Daniel argues we will face far more Islamic and, I suspect, to a lesser extent, far-right extremism. You can let me know what you think about that story or Britain's infrastructure issues, which is the main topic we're discussing this hour, at 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. It is 14 minutes to 8.
LBC.
Honestly, I've been putting MTD off. First it was, I'll do it after this job. Then, after some grouting. After sorting the back of the van. After fish fingers and peas. And then I thought, no, just get it done.
Get MTD done simply with Sage for free. Just connect to your bank, we'll sort your transactions, then submit your update to HMRC. Search Sage MTD.
Goldbank London, a safe and sound way to buy and sell gold.
Start your journey in gold today.
Visit goldbank.co.uk.
Big Motoring World is the nation's biggest used car supermarket, so we go big on things like peace of mind. That's why we're proud to announce we're an RAC approved dealer, and all our cars come with a free 3-month warranty and RAC breakdown cover. Drive away with peace of mind at Visit bigmotoringworld.co.uk to verify comparison and for T's and C's. Nation's biggest refers to cars in stock.
A message from TfL for drivers, motorcyclists and cyclists. Before you turn, look around. Is there someone crossing or waiting to cross at the junction? You now need to always let them cross before you turn. Follow the highway code to keep everyone safe. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Leading Britain's conversation, LBC, with Simon Marks.
And we're talking about the state of the country's infrastructure. Ben is a new caller to LBC from Banstead in Surrey. Evening, Ben. How are you tonight? Thanks very much for calling.
No problem. How are you, Simon?
I'm all right, thanks. What would you like to say about infrastructure and your experience of trying to deal with it?
I originally grew up on the Isle of Wight, and basically what happened is the ferries used to be part of sort of national rail, and they've been privatised. And since then, the price of the service and the quantity of sailings has been impacted. So it's just getting ever more expensive, but they're running less and less services. So if I want to go back and visit my family for a weekend, if I take the car, it can cost up to £200.
Wow, that's a lot of money. Is that's for a round trip?
Yeah, that's for a round trip. So there's two different operators, but because they're both sort of private companies, they can sort of charge whatever they want, really, because there's no other sort of way to get your car over, if you see what I mean.
And prior to the privatisation, who was running that service? It was part of British Rail?
It was part of British Rail. I believe it was called Sea-Link or something. But
I remember Sea-Link. Yes, absolutely. Of course. Gosh, that takes me back a very long time. Well, I wonder if that's also part of the plan to be dealt with. I mean, you would argue that it's absolutely got to be dealt with.
It does, because we look up at places like Scotland, and they've taken it into sort of public ownership again, and all the fares are sort of capped and seem far more reasonable. But we're sort of at the behest of whatever the private companies want to charge, and we've seen like the amount of ferries reduce, but also the prices go up, and they've sort of all brought into what's it called, sort of dynamic pricing as well. So if you want to go back at sort of normal times, it costs you even more.
And the point about this, of course, Ben, is that for anybody that is travelling between the Isle of Wight and the mainland, and that's doing business between the two, those costs must be significantly constraining the ability of those businesses to contribute to the economy.
Yeah, no, of course, and the island also relies on tourism a lot, and it sort of also impacts just people living there, because I know, like my family, they might want to go over to IKEA in Southampton, or they want to go to Portsmouth and go shopping and sort of go around Gunwolf Keys, but you've got to sort of factor on top that extra money, it could be up to £200, and it really sort of cuts off the island, if I'm honest. So,
and how often do you go?
Not as much as I'd want to. I go back down to see them, my family, a few times a year, but you sort of got to try and play your cards right with sort of the ferries, and whether you can get one at a reasonable price.
Ben, thank you for shining a light on the situation in terms of travel to and from the Isle of Wight. I mean, that's a really interesting example of infrastructure. Niall has just texted in to say that he agrees entirely. I'm in the Isle of Wight now. A return ferry with a small car was £215, and that's with a veteran's discount. So that's definitely an area that has got to be addressed and needs to go on what is going to be Andy Burnham's very long list. Let's go to Steve, who is in Gillingham. I hope I pronounced that correctly. It's not Gillingham, it's Gillingham, right, Steve?
You're absolutely right. Good evening,
in
Simon.
Dorset, right?
That is correct. Yes, indeed. We're served by South-Western trains. The rolling stock down on the line from London Waterloo, which runs down to Exeter St David's, is diesel powered. We are suffering of late due to apparently rolling stock being in for repair. I've learnt today from a Railtrack employee that that's because the company has sold off 3 of its carriages that it actually owned. It leases the others, and it now lost the resilience to run the service. So what would normally be a 9-carriage train up to Salisbury and splits, they're running sometimes just 3. So there's a lot of overcrowding. The track is obviously suffering with the dry weather, and is a single track in this part of the country. Now, Gillingham itself is an expanding town. But where's the investment in the infrastructure? We're not electrified, we're, as I say, diesel. And my question probably is to the government, yes, you're levelling up the North with number 10 North, etc. But where is that investment in the southwest in these expanding towns? I'll certainly be contacting our local MP, is Simon Hoare, the Conservative MP, and putting my learnings to him, because I'd like what's gone on in terms of nationalisation. I've also learnt that the actual company First Group, who owns South Western, are still financially budgeted for that train line until end of 2027. And yet when the trains break down and you ask them, are you putting on buses and taxis, they answered to me last week when we were thrown off the train at Salisbury, terminated early, was we can't do that anymore. We're nationalised now. Well, that's not quite true. So there's a lot of detail in the contract which the public are not made aware of. There's half truths being told, and I think there needs to be a little digging done, if I'm honest.
And Steve, I'm really glad that you called in, because I was very keen to get a voice on from the Southwest tonight.
Well, that's why I called, Simon. That's why I called. I heard your plea.
Well, I'm very grateful that you picked up the phone, because we've heard so much about devolution of powers and resources, and, you know, let's give Andy Burnham his due. He says he wants to engage in devolution for the South, the North, the East and the West. He's absolutely determined, he says, to make sure that this is not all about Greater Manchester and the North. And yet I've heard from many callers here on LBC, not just to my programme, but to other programmes as well, from the Southwest, where people are worried that they are going to get left behind.
Yeah, and that's very true. As I say, we are expanding in this area. It's not just a railway that's not fit for purpose. I mean, you know, the latest train you can get back from London, I think, is about 9:30 in the evening. It's at the weekends, or Friday at the weekend, it's slightly later. You can get as far as Salisbury. Beyond that, where it becomes single track, you have no chance, and therefore you're relying on taxi services. Now, we're an expanding town. You know, as much as the area is, it needs the infrastructure to go with it. It's not all about housing targets. With housing comes infrastructure. The schools around here, I think they're in porter cabins. It's just a good example of how we're not fit for purpose, and how the rolling stock is also not fit for purpose. Many a train driver says it's not suitable for this line. It should be, you know, these are short commuter trains, and yet they're being used to run up to London. You know, air conditioning often breaks, etc., which I get they can do that in hot weather. It's not designed. I mean,
you're lucky even to have air conditioning.
Well, you are, and of course they have. You know when the air conditioner's not working, because they have to open the windows, and they're like they're very small slots. You know, obviously. What's more interesting, I think, is the fact that with all the expansion that is going on, there's more stress being put onto the railway, and yet the rolling stock, the staff running on overtime a lot of the time, because it's cheaper to pay overtime than it is to employ. Of course, the national insurance contributions, the pensions, etc., are a saving. I get it, but you need to have the resilience. Where's the business continuity?
And you need
there isn't any.
And you need it, of course, to grow the economy nationally by growing it in all areas, by improving the infrastructure in all areas. Steve, thank you so much for picking up the phone. Really great to hear from you. Steve in Gillingham in Dorset. Vivian has texted in from Edinburgh to say, Simon, how good to hear a good word about Scotland's ferries, otherwise so often misportrayed as a basket case, but actually a fantastic service. Please emphasise this. And I'm super happy to emphasise it, Vivian, because I was up in Edinburgh last summer and then went on a trip around the Highlands, and we took multiple ferries, you know, to the Isle of Mull and back and so on and so forth. I couldn't believe the ferry service. I thought it was absolutely staggeringly superb and relatively inexpensive, certainly much less in terms of cost than we've been hearing about getting to the Isle of Wight. And Joe has texted in to say the Solent Strait, the stretch of water between the mainland and the Isle of Wight, is the most expensive strait of water to cross in the world. Let's go to Sunningdale just to wrap this up. Ray is there this evening. Ray, I've only got about a minute, but what would you like to say?
I'd like to say we know what the problem is. You got a text earlier from somebody in America who complained about the infrastructure, and we're complaining here about the infrastructure. There's a common denominator: privatization of the national profit and loss and balance sheet. That's where it's at. And what Andy's trying to do, I'm behind him 100%. Over 200 billion just in the water companies has been taken out of this country, and you cannot dictate to private owners what they do with their profits. But if those companies hired the right CEOs and they made the same amount of money, some of that money would have gone back into building and maintaining infrastructure. This thing is economics 101. It's simple. Renationalize everything that you can renationalize. Hire the best CEOs in the world, like we did for Marconi during the credit crunch when he came over and became the governor of the Bank of England, Canadian. Get the best CEOs. We do it for football. You can sure do it for infrastructure.
Ray, fantastic call. Thank you very much for wrapping up the hour. Ray, very keen on getting many of these industries back into public ownership. We will talk about infrastructure again, because I thought that was really interesting. Coming up after the news, we're going to talk more about prisons and the staffing crunch that may prevent Andy Burnham from opening new jails at a record rate.
The money is not good enough. Every day I walk into work and I'm like, is this the day that I'm not coming home?
That is LBC caller Sophia, a 10-year veteran of the prison service. You may have heard her last night telling this programme that she is putting her life on the line every single day and not making anywhere near enough money to compensate her for her courage. Andy Burnham says he's going to build new prisons faster than at any time since the Victorian era, and there's certainly no shortage of people not in education, employment or training, the NEETs, who might fit the bill to become prison or probation officers. But would you take a job in those services? And if you work in them, would you recommend people to?
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, power supply issues are causing big problems for rail commuters across the northwest of England. It spreads wider than that if you're travelling between big cities. Multiple operators are warning of delays of up to 2 hours or cancellations that could last until the end of the day. LBC's northwest of England correspondent Liam Gotting is in Manchester.
Well, according to National Rail, multiple rail companies are affected and have issued do not travel notices, including Avanti West Coast, East Midlands Railway, Northern Rail, TransPennine Express, Transport for Wales, Lumo and London North Western Railway. A statement from Transport for Greater Manchester says due to a power failure at the Manchester Rail Operating Centre.
Prime Minister Andy Burnham's ordered an urgent review to identify any grooming gang members who may be eligible to be freed from prison under the government's early release scheme. It comes after Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch raised concerns that child sex offenders could leave jail well before the end of their sentences. 5,000 inmates are due to be released under measures to ease prison overcrowding. A farmer who shot dead his lodger and hid his body in a concrete-filled barrel for 6 years has been jailed for life with a minimum of 35 years. Christopher Wright, who's 73, was found guilty of murdering Richard Dyson in Barnsley. He was reported missing by his daughter in 2019. Suspicions were raised after police were told the men had argued over stolen guns. Detective Constable Fiona Bowling read a statement on behalf of the Dyson family.
It was a dad, a brother, a friend, an uncle and a man with so much love to give. The pain of losing Richard is unbearable, and the way he was taken makes the pain even harder to carry. It was cruel and heartless, and we will carry that grief for the rest of our lives.
Croatia's Football Federation is the latest to withdraw support for Gianni Infantino's re-election as FIFA president. It follows the English FA sending a letter to officially do the same. And EasyJet's agreed to a £5.7 billion takeover by the private equity firm Apollo. The US investor won a bidding war after rival Castle Lake withdrew ahead of tomorrow's takeover deadline. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed down 20 points at 10,867. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.16. LBC weather, mostly dry with clear spells tonight. Showers in Wales and the northwest with heavier rain for Scotland, lows of 4 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Simon Marks.
I am in for Ian Dale again tonight, and we are going to come back this hour to the topic of crime and punishment.
we're in a dangerous place if the justice system is tipping towards making more decisions based on the resources available than they are based on the risk that offenders pose to communities.
Metropolitan Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley telling Nick Ferrari at breakfast this morning here on LBC that he stands with the head of the Thames Valley Police Force in expressing grave disquiet over the government's decision on early prison releases that will, as you know, allow the killers of PC Andrew Harper to be eligible to go free. It is a pretty extraordinary moment when only in the third full week of a new Prime Minister's time in office, the head of the Met breaks with the government over an issue that has angered so many people. Here is more of what Sir Mark told Nick this morning.
Officers go out day in and day out to protect communities. They need the sense that the law is behind them when they're assaulted, when they take these risks. On top of that, what this means for his family and the campaign they've done, they've shown extraordinary dignity and in terms of what they've sought to do. To then have the offenders released early is obviously particularly upsetting for them. But police officers see it as a message of a lack of support from the justice system, and I don't think that's good.
Now, last night on the programme, we heard that hundreds of prison spaces are lying empty at a new prison in Yorkshire due to severe staffing shortages, and that's for a new jail that has already been built. The government says it intends to create 14,000 new prison places by 2031 in what the Prime Minister calls the fastest prison construction programme since the Victorian era. But after you've built them, how are you going to staff them?
The violence in jails now is absolutely a peak point. Staff are going home injured on a regular basis.
That is LBC listener Sophia in Stafford, a 10-year veteran of the prison service. She called the programme last night and told us that every single day she goes to work, she wonders if she'll safely make it home.
I mean, we do get new staff in and, you know, brilliant. It's amazing, but they don't last long because the job is intense. They've cut the training programme down now. So it's just, you know, it's filling spaces, ticking boxes, but it's not for the faint-hearted, to be honest. I've been stabbed, cut, I've been hot-watered, I've been potted, like as you know, as like someone's bodily fluids. You know, more times than I can count, to be honest. I mean, my body is covered in scars, and they're all from being in the prison service.
And Sophia, can I ask you roughly what kind of salary do you get paid?
So I bring on about £2,400 a month.
£2,400 a month to put up with all of that. The prison service isn't the only piece of the problem that is understaffed. The probation inspector said this week that the government's plans to give offenders who are released early electronic tags so that they can be monitored will be an immediate problem due to understaffing. They are already about 10,000 staff short and will need even more to deal with the early releases. Now, at a time of 16.2% youth unemployment across the UK, at a point where we're all talking about NEETs, those people not in employment, education, nor training, you would think that there's an opportunity there to help resolve the crisis of staffing in the prisons and the probation services. But if you're out of work, would you work in the prison service after everything you heard last night?
If it's something you really want to do, then I'm all about supporting people, and you don't want to ruin someone's dreams or ambition to be a prison officer, but it's not what you see on television. The money is not good enough for every day. I mean, every day I walk into work and I'm like, is this the day that I'm not coming home?
Staggering stuff, I thought, from Sophia in Stafford last night. If you are in the prison service or the probation service, would you encourage people to come and sign up for some of those positions that are currently open? What do you think the government needs to do to make those jobs more attractive? And obviously, that is partly about more money. And for all of you, whether you're working in the prison and probation service or doing anything else, don't we have to pay people like Sophia more than 2,400 quid a month to deal with the kind of turmoil and danger she is facing every single day at work, especially if we want to fix the problem that the government is facing? This cycle of the prisons filling up, early releases then having to take place. You can fix it by building new prisons, as Andy Burnham is contemplating. But again, once you've built them, you've got to be able to staff them. Call me at 0345 6060 973. Same number for WhatsApp that it is for the phones. You can text 84850. How are we going to get out of this cycle? Let's start by talking this hour to Mark Fairhurst, the National Chair of the Prison Officers Association. Mr. Fairhurst, I'm really grateful to you for being with us here on LBC this evening. I mean, I was really struck, as you will have heard and understood, by that call that we took from Sophia last night. But can I ask you, first of all, I mean, how broadly representative do you think her views are of prison officers about not only the dangers that they face, but about the balance sheet that she has to draw up when someone asks her about becoming a prison officer? Good evening to you.
Good evening, Simon. Yeah, that reference from the serving prison officer yesterday is bluntly accurate. And it is absolutely horrific at the moment in our prisons. I class them as the most hostile and violent workplace of anywhere in the world, because they really are. Each and every day, 27 prison officers are assaulted, 3 of which end up hospitalised. Some never come back to work. PTSD amongst my members is on the increase because of the trauma we face. And to be frank, the pay is not worth the risk.
But of course, in order to fix the problem of overcrowding in prisons, the government's going to build new prisons. We reported here on LBC last night that there is one newly constructed prison, HMP Millspike in Yorkshire, where there are 100 staff, 100 places are vacant because they can't find the staff to fill them. How difficult is it to persuade people to join the profession? Because your members need more colleagues to help them out, as well as having to persuade people to sign up for the money that's on offer. I mean, this is a conundrum.
It is, but at the moment, recruiting people and trying to attract people to the job isn't an issue, and that's because the starting salary is really attractive. So a starting salary for a 39-hour week is at just over £37,000 per annum. Plus you get the option to work overtime. But what it's attractive to is late teens, early 20s, living at home with mum and dad, who are well above minimum wage and can live a decent lifestyle. It's not attractive to those who've got 2 kids, £1,200 a month mortgage, and quite fancy a career in midlife, who've got life skills and life experience. And what we find is, because the training, believe it or not, Simon, the training is only 6 weeks long, it doesn't prepare new recruits for the reality of life on the landings. And of course, there's a severe lack of experience now in the job, a severe lack of support for new recruits. So they quickly find out that the dream they've been sold doesn't exist, and half of them don't last more than 3 years.
And the training, the period of training, as I understand it, has been cut back. Is that right?
So when I joined in 1992, it was a 2-week induction at your local prison, and then you went away to training college residential for 12 weeks. It's now being cut to 6 weeks because it's all about saving money and getting boots on the landings, quantity over quality.
I've got a question that's just come in from one of our listeners, Ben, in North Yorkshire, who wants to know, if you're working for a private prison, are the wages comparable to the wages that are offered if you sign up to the prison service?
Well, this is the problem, Simon. The government have committed to building 4 new prisons, 3 of which are going to be private, and only 1 public sector. The public sector now pay more than the private sector. We never used to, but our starting salaries are higher. And what we've found at that prison you quoted, Millspike in Yorkshire, is that they join that private company The working conditions there are atrocious. Violence is rife. They can't retain staff. But what they use it as a stepping stone to join the public sector prison services, because right next door to that prison is HMP Full Sutton, which is a public sector prison. So they go next door.
And so as the country has started to debate the early prison releases that the government now says will take place, they're not going to allow rapists, violent sexual offenders or grooming gang members out early, but the killers of PC Andrew Harper are absolutely going to be eligible to be part of this prison release plan. And as Andy Burnham talks about building a record number of new prisons, 14,000 new places by 2031, when you look at Mr. Burnham saying that he is absolutely determined to end this cycle, can he do it the way that things currently are laid out?
He's going to have a long-term strategy. And what we've said all along in the POA is that they're spending over £4 billion building 4 new prisons. And the problem with building new prisons is you will always fill them. And what you could do with that £4 billion, you could modernise the entire prison estate. You could invest in a probation service, which is absolutely on its knees and can't cope with current workloads. Invest in them so they can develop and supervise robust community sentences that the public have faith in and confidence in. You could build more secure mental health units, because there's a lot of people in prison with acute mental health disorders who are only there because there's nowhere else to put them. And you could rid our prisons of female offenders, who 80% of which are in for non-violent crime. We have a cohort of prisoners, probably about 3,000, who are there for indeterminate prison sentences, IPPs they're called. Many of them are 10 and 15 years over their release date. Why can't we release some of them? They can't all be at risk to the public. And of course, look at the remand population, which is about 17,000. We should only remand people accused of the most serious crimes. So there are lots of options available. If he wanted to exempt people convicted of manslaughter, I believe there's only 500 in the system. Well, you could create 500 spaces by reducing the remand population. That's an easy win.
So if you know this, how is it possible that the government doesn't know this?
Because Andy Burnham hasn't spoken to the POA yet, and he's getting advised by MOJ number crunchers who consistently over the years have miscalculated prison population predictions. That's the issue. He's dealing with bureaucrats, not people who've been in a job for 30-odd years, who know what they're talking about and know how to resolve these issues. I wish someone would sit down with us and listen to us.
And can I ask you about one other issue? And I know it's not necessarily completely on your list of responsibilities, but I was reading today in the Financial Times that it costs more to build a new prison per square foot than it costs to build luxury housing. How is that possible?
Yes. Because the procurement system, as soon as a building company knows they're getting a public sector contract, they can name their own price. It costs about £600,000 per cell, I think I read somewhere.
Yeah, that's right. £600,000 per place.
Ridiculous. Think of the... Yeah, per cell, yeah. So think of what you could utilise that money for if you had sentence reform and invested in non-custodial sentences and only locked up the most serious offenders who pose the most significant risk to the general public. We could do so much more. We could address people's addictions. We could give them work skills so they got a chance of leading law-abiding lives. We could reduce the population so much if we invested in that. But unfortunately, Simon, as we all know, governments would rather spend money on police and the NHS and our schools because prisons are not vote winners. But unfortunately, cuts have consequences. We've experienced over 14 years of austerity measures. The last government closed 23 public sector prisons with the loss of over 10,500 cell spaces, and how we need those spaces now. Instead of investing in the service and having the modern service that everyone can be proud of, we now have to introduce emergency measures to release people early.
Mark Fairhurst, I'm so grateful to you for your time this evening, the National Chair of the Prison Officers Association. The more we talk about this issue, and we've spoken about prisons in various ways every night this week, the more apparent it becomes that you can't just wave a magic wand at this and say, right, I'm going to be building 14,000 new prison places by 2031, and that's going to fix the problem. Because, as we're talking about tonight, if you can't staff those prisons, it's not going to have any impact on the problem whatsoever. So give me a call at 0345 6060 973. Tell me what you think about the crisis in staffing at both the prison service and the probation office. And if you're out of work, would you consider going to work for either of those services? And if you work for those services, would you recommend that other people work for them? Regarding the working conditions at HMP Millsike that Mark Fairhurst just mentioned, a spokesperson for the Ministry of Justice has told LBC this government inherited a prison system in crisis, but is taking the decisive action needed to restore order and protect the public, building 14,000 prison places and investing millions to support our hard-working staff who navigate some of the toughest environments in the country. While the prison service has a clear and transparent process for reducing capacity in the event of staffing issues, the prison officer resignation rate is at its lowest in 5 years, and we are at 92% of our staffing target for frontline officers. And here on LBC, we've also approached Mighty, the company which runs that prison, for a response as well. Coming up next, your texts and calls. How are we going to staff the new prisons that we build? It's 8:20.
Ben Kentish from 10 p.m.
As Andy Burnham announces 160 new mental health centres will open across the country. What most helped you when you were struggling? Your calls on that to come, plus details of a major new immigration announcement from the Tories, and fury today after Westminster Council launches a crackdown on people standing up in pubs. The Prime Minister says it's an attack on the British way of life. But what do you think?
Ben Kentish from 10 p.m. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Pick up more sun cream. Impromptu picnic. Late night cinema trip. Do more this summer. Hop on and off with the Weekend Hopper. Get unlimited weekend bus and tram journeys for £1.75 per day every Saturday and Sunday from the 25th of July. Plan your journey with the TfL Go app. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters. Offer valid from 4:30 a.m. on the 25th of July until 23:59 Monday the 31st of August. Always use the same card or device when touching in. For more information, search TfL Hopper.
Now, listen carefully. I want you to think of selling your car. Who's going to buy that car? Keep thinking. Struggling to know where to look? On Motorway, there are 7,500 verified dealers who are ready and waiting to bid on your car. It's not magic, it's Motorway. Sell your car today at motorway.co.uk.
Your holiday park home will be a great investment.
You'll lose thousands on your holiday park home.
All the fees are fully explained.
There are hidden fees you're unaware of.
Yeah, you can easily sell anytime.
You'll be charged a fortune if you sell. You're not always told both sides of the story. If you bought a home on a holiday park, contact Holiday Park Advice Centre. Because if you were missold, we can help. Text ASSIST to 78900. Fees apply.
Simon Marks on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Which is what Dan has done, and he is in Sutton. Good evening, Dan.
Good evening, Simon.
What would you like to say about prisons, staffing thereof, and the role that it's going to play in fixing the prison crisis?
A bit of background. I used to work at Magistrates Court, Crown Court, County Court, Immigration Court, went into the prison service, went into a very large Cat B prison in Surrey, left the service, rejoined, went back to work at Wandsworth, which is slightly different, but back to Highdown. When I was there in 2004, they built two new, I think it was about 2006, built two new wings. They had no staff then. That's 20 years ago. They was taking staff from all over the country and paying them absolute fortunes to work there. They would include, so their travel time would be part of their shift. So let's say they come from Yorkshire and say it's 5 or 6 hours. That's their shift done for the day. Going back on another shift is another shift done. So they can only work for 3 days. It's nothing new. I was there when the early release scheme came out the first time around under, I think it must have been Labour, or maybe Chris Grayling, but And then there was doubling up cells. The single cells became double cells became triple cells. And now, apart like Mark Fairhurst said, if you're an 18-year-old now, you can walk into Wandsworth on a £40,000 a year contract. They've got no life experience. They've got no nothing. You say 6 weeks training. Some of the training is given by staff being in the job for a year.
Do you think that those new staff that are being recruited with 6 weeks training at a young age are basically being set up to fail?
Yes, cannon fodder.
Cannon fodder?
Yes. I worked at Wandsworth. I was in segregation in Wandsworth. I'm not trying to big myself up. I'm quite a big lump of a man. I work with lots of lumps of men, but you've got 18-year-old boys and girls coming down, telling a prisoner who's probably served more time than they've been alive, telling them what to do. They just look at them and go, I don't think so. They've got no social skills. The lady was saying that you had them last night. Don't get me wrong, people do get assaulted. I feel really sorry for them. But it does come out the way you talk to people and stuff. You have to learn respect from these people. I know that they're criminals, etc., etc. But if there's only 2 of you and there's 80 of them, when you're looking for association, it's a no-brainer. You have to get on with them. You spend more time than you do with your own family.
So what do you think needs to be done, Dan, to fix it? Because if we don't fix this, there is no possible way that Andy Burnham or any government can say, I've got a plan for solving the prison issue, we're just going to build more jails.
I don't think they have got a plan, to be honest with you. Lord Timpson, I think he just
left the government, yeah.
He just left, yeah, but I think he was more so, we can get everyone to go and work in my shop sort of thing, sort of mollycoddling. But I agree, it's very hard. I don't think they can ever recruit enough staff, because they say recruit 10 staff this week, 5 will be by end of next week, and the rest of them are gone by a couple of weeks after that. Why would you want to go into prison where you're going to be, I won't swear obviously, but you're going to be sworn out all day, told what the hope happened to your family? And then I'll give you an example. One shift, I stayed, worked a normal shift, they're very short, I stayed overnight, be very careful what I say. Somebody was a prolific self-harmer, somebody had a heart attack, somebody was off their head on spice, another person was off their head on spice eating their own shoe, and then somebody tried to escape. That's in one evening, that's one night shift from 8:30 at night till 7:30 in the morning.
If someone, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Sophia last night, the caller who called in last night. If someone came to you and said, I'm thinking of a career in the prison service, what would you say to them?
I'd say think very carefully. As I've said to your producer or the lady on the phone before, I tried to go back in to the service. I absolutely love the job. But they said because I've now got debts accumulated since I left the prison service, we're talking like low, maybe £2,000 or £3,000. They said we can't, because you're at a risk that you'll be coerced by prisoners, shall we say.
And Dan, have you had any experience in the probation service?
No, probation service, I know. I know people still work there. When I was at High Down again, so that was the prison I started at, say if you yourself, say Simon and Mark said, how can I go and see the probation officer? Yeah, who is it? Oh, it's Mr. Vernon, i.e. me. 1 minute, make a phone call, they come and see them. They're not in the prison anymore. But they've cut that, Chris Graydon, whoever else it was, cut probation service. And I spoke to James before, I spoke to everyone before. If you're late for an appointment, they put you back in prison.
But I mean, because that's, but there's a huge problem there, because they're saying that with these early release prisoners, the 5,000 that they're going to let out over 10 months starting in October, they're all going to be given electronic tags. They're going to be given the ankle bracelets. And the probation inspector immediately said, well, hang on a second, we haven't got the staff to monitor that many people.
So we know it's going to go to one of the minister's friends. One of the ones, I think, I won't mention names, but I'm sure one of them, one of our previous prime ministers, one of their...
So you think it's all going to go to private companies?
Of course. It used to be Securical, but I think Securical folded now. I've gone to a company called something else now, Serco now. It'll go to them, it always does. And again, you're paying people a pittance to go to somebody's house, make sure they're there. If they're not there, what they do, they phone the police, so the police get called up.
You do not sound to me, Dan, like you have any confidence that this problem is going to be resolved, that we are not going to get out of this cycle of prisons filling up, occasional early releases, sort of to let the pressure gauge, open the pressure valve, but then very quickly you're going to find yourself back in the same problem.
So, 2 more points. I know you're a busy man before you cut me off. So when I was there, under Mr. Cameron, they decided they would take all prisoners who were on a script, i.e. for coming off of heroin, onto methadone, because it was cheaper than Subutex. One of the prisoners got involved, got a solicitor involved, took it to the High Court, it got thrown out. That was their way of saving money and get prisoners off of drugs. That got thrown out, and that was, 15 years ago plus. Also, they changed prison categories now. Like the one I used to work at is now Category C. It started for Category A, 30 years ago. As it goes down the chain, less staff. Same amount of prisoners, on the same crimes, they just recategorise them, less staff.
And so with the experience you've had, Dan, I mean, it almost sounds like you've been watching a slow-motion train wreck. You knew this was coming.
I spoke to James, I think, in 2019, 18. Told him then, I said that staff will, I hate to say it, some of the staff will be seriously injured, if not worse. And that was 8 years ago. Nothing's changed, it's got worse. You're giving 18-year-old officers, again, now if you're a Category C prison, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm 99% sure, you don't carry pepper spray because it's Category C prison. But you do in a Category B prison. What's the difference? They're still the same man. They might have been in Category B last week, been a good boy for a couple of weeks, and their sentence is reduced now, gone to Category C, pick off, and you're hoping there's enough staff to do what you need to do without the protection you need.
Dan, I'm really grateful to you for calling into LBC and sharing your experiences with us. I can't say it was terribly uplifting or providing any great sense of confidence or optimism about all of this. Many of you are texting in with various ideas. Scott has texted in to say the government should seriously consider recruiting people from abroad to train and work as prison officers if they cannot recruit the number required from our own working population. Extra money should also be offered to give prison officers an incentive to stay in the job. The same could apply to probation officers. Alan has texted in and said simply, "Hi, use the army to staff the prisons." I mean, the difficulty with that, of course, is that's not really the Army's full-time job, and you'd have to train the Army up to staff the prisons, and you'd have to see how members of the Army felt about becoming de facto prison or probation officers. This is a real pickle. And the more we talk about this week here on LBC and the more we investigate various aspects of it, the clearer I think it is becoming that the government's going to have to rethink the policy and develop it in a much more comprehensive way if the Prime Minister is truly going to achieve his goal of getting out of the current vicious circle in which we find ourselves. Let me know your views. 0345 6060 for the phones, 84850 for the texts. Coming up after the news, UEFA has warned that British home nations and the rest of Europe will still go ahead with their threatened boycotts of the World Cup and its associated tournaments, saying they have not received the assurances from FIFA President Gianni Infantino that they demanded. They want promises that he won't ever try to launch another scheme to sell off shares in the world's biggest sporting event. We're going to talk to Kieran Maguire from the Price of Football podcast about that next. But now at 29 minutes to 9, the news headlines with Daryl Jackson.
National Rail says an electrical supply failure is causing major disruption in Greater Manchester and the northwest of England. Also, people in Leeds have struggled to travel across the country or even just in Yorkshire. The Prime Minister, Andy Burnham's, ordered an urgent review to identify any grooming gang members who may be eligible to be freed from prison under the government's early release scheme. It comes after Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch raised concerns that child sex offenders could leave jail well before the end of their sentences. And Croatia's Football Federation's the latest to withdraw support from Gianni Infantino's re-election as FIFA president. It follows the English FA sending a letter officially to do the same. LBC weather mostly dry with clear spells tonight. Showers in Wales and the northwest with heavier rain for Scotland. Lows of 4 degrees.
This is LBC.
Picture your car. You want to sell it, but you feel trapped by the chains of your finance deal. Now, listen closely. Hear that? That was the sound of your car selling and the cash hitting your account. It's easy to sell your financed car on Motorway. We'll handle the admin and pay off the finance for you. It's not magic, it's Motorway. Sell your car today at motorway.co.uk. Process may vary in case of negative equity.
Up to speed. Your Formula One podcast. Round 12, we head to the Netherlands for the Dutch Grand Prix.
New episodes every Monday and Thursday on YouTube or Global Player.
Under the beating Serengeti sun, here we see a young pygmy hippo spending its days frolicking in the mud, much like our...
Oh, Dad.
What?
Stop talking like that, you're freaking out the chimps.
Take a safari to London Zoo with kids' train tickets for £2 on off-peak journeys. Thameslink Railway, where every stop is a story. Terms apply.
You know that feeling when you're out, something cool happens and you just have to capture it. The new Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 8 gets it. Thanks to its new wide design, content looks and feels so much better. Unfold it for a massive cinematic screen. Close it for perfect reels on the go. No cropping, no missing bits. Just content exactly as it was meant to be seen. Pre-order the new Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 8 on EE for only £54 per month, increasing to £56.50 March 2027 and £59 March 2028. Airtime plan and 48-month device credit agreement required. Subject to status, 18+. Credit provided by EE Limited.
Leading Britain's conversation, LBC, with Simon Marks.
And I just want to tell you a bit more about that news that we heard in the headlines from Daryl about the Prime Minister ordering an urgent review to identify any grooming gang members who may be eligible for early release under the programme that the Ministry of Justice has drawn up. Remember that when we first started hearing about all of this, we were told that anybody convicted of rape, anybody convicted of violent sexual assault, any member of a grooming gang would be ineligible for early release. That was where the line was drawn. The killers of PC Andrew Harper, of course, fell below that line. Well, the Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch pointed out that indecent assault was not it was not included in the list of offences that the government said would be excluded from the early release scheme. And there are 5 men who were part of an historical grooming gang case in Bradford who were convicted of indecent assault. So she essentially was saying, hang on a second, there's grooming gang members that could be eligible for early release. And now Andy Burnham's spokesperson says that the Prime Minister has asked the Ministry of Justice to conduct an in-depth review of cases to ensure that grooming gang cases are identified. The work is happening urgently. This is extremely important to the Prime Minister, and he has personally intervened to ensure everything possible is being done, this is a quote, so that vile groomers are dealt with in the way that their victims deserve. So even that aspect of all of this, even what we were initially told were the crimes that people would not be subject to early release if they'd been convicted of those crimes, even that in these particular cases is now in question. We're going to come back to our conversation about the prison service, staff shortages there. Would you join it if you had an opportunity to do so in a moment? But first, I want to bring you an update about FIFA chief Gianni Infantino. His capacity to remain in the job appeared to be narrowing further today. UEFA said its threat to boycott the World Cup and FIFA's other tournaments remains in force, that Mr. Infantino's decision to abandon his current plans to privatise part of those competitions changes nothing about UEFA's determination to get a written commitment from him that no such plans will ever be pursued again. And the English FA today sent FIFA a letter officially withdrawing their support for Infantino. How long can he hang on? I'm joined now by Kieran Maguire, Professor of Football Finance at the University of Liverpool. He's the author of the book, The Price of Football, and the co-presenter of the podcast of the same name, The Price of Football. Kieran Maguire, thanks very much for being with us tonight. Let me ask you then, first of all, how long can Gianni Infantino hang on? Good evening to you.
Good evening. Well, he's certainly scrabbling around at present. He's trying to find out who his allies are. Those seem to be diminishing but not disappearing totally. And there are still some countries who are big fans of Gianni Infantino because for the past decade or so, he's been a very generous benefactor to them in the money that FIFA hands out on an annual basis.
UEFA is basically saying, we wrote you a letter, we told you what we needed from you, you haven't delivered it. Is that right?
Yes, he's given a typical politician's answer. He said there may have been mistakes, he's been misunderstood, and that the present form of the privatisation of FIFA's commercial and broadcasting arm isn't going to take place, but that's not ruling it out altogether. And I think there are similarities here with what happened with the Super League 4 or 5 years ago, that while some clubs effectively wore the sackcloth and said, "Oh, it's a terrible mistake, and we've been misunderstood, and yes, it won't happen again." It took 3 to 4 years for that to finally cease to be a threat to the existing European football market.
And when the FA, the English FA, sends FIFA a letter officially withdrawing their support for Infantino, I wasn't entirely clear what that meant.
Well, what happened was about 6 months ago, the English FA indicated that they would sort of support Gianni Infantino. It looked like it was going to be more of a coronation at the time than a presidential race, in the sense that there were no alternative candidates, and therefore he was going to receive the backing of all of FIFA's 211 members. It does seem fairly lacklustre from the Football Association that we're sort of now into week 2 of this particular issue, and they're now announcing their lack of support. They have indicated before that they were going to withdraw it. I think this is just the formal confirmation of what they've said in public in the past few days.
He doesn't look like the resigning type to me.
He's not. He's a wily old campaigner. He knows where the bodies lie in FIFA and UEFA and elsewhere, and he will be using his political skills that he's picked up from elsewhere. He does know his way around the boardrooms. He does know a way around the conferences as well to determine whether or not he thinks he's still got a chance. There has to be around about 43 members of FIFA to put in for a vote of no confidence. There's no indication that will be the case as yet. Again, I think UEFA will be themselves courting opinion from the other federations to see whether they can get a majority support to have him removed from his position. And also, nobody said that they're willing to oppose him for the presidential race. So at present, yes, he looks a bit of a lame duck, but we're far from the finish line.
And Kieran, can I ask you about the notion that there are some people out there that say while Gianni Infantino's plan to privatise bits of the World Cup, supported as it was going to be by the brother of President Trump's son-in-law, while that was a completely disgraceful, shameful effort to kind of capitalise on the World Cup that we've just seen and to hive the bits of the sport off into private hands, there are some voices out there that say the concept of getting more investment, more private investment into the world of football is not in and of itself inherently evil. But has Gianni Infantino essentially taken FIFA to a place where any sort of future suggestion like this is now just going to be complete anathema?
It's going to be a huge challenge, I think, for anybody to persuade the likes of UEFA, who have taken a very strong stance against this. How can they revert their stance in a year or two just because it's a different plan with a different distribution model? Ultimately, FIFA claims to be a not-for-profit organisation whose aim is to focus on spreading the word of football, to make it an even more global phenomenon than it is at present, to increase the number of kids playing, to increase the number of women playing, and so on. That's at odds with private equity, whose aim, and there's nothing wrong with having this aim, is to maximise the return on investment. So that would mean more competitions, more matches, smaller domestic leagues, higher prices, potentially football going behind a paywall for the World Cup and so on.
Kieran, I'm very grateful to you. Thanks so much for coming on the programme tonight. Kieran Maguire, Professor of Football Finance at the University of Liverpool, author of the book The Price of Football, co-presenter of the podcast The Price of Football. And next Tuesday afternoon, you can see Kieran and his podcast co-host Kevin Day live on stage at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, where they will be interviewed by a man called Ian Dale. Not sure who he is. So if you're up in Edinburgh for that, you'll enjoy it very much. Next Tuesday afternoon, Ian Dale interviewing Kieran Maguire and Kevin Day live at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. Let's go back to our conversation about prisons and prison officers and staffing of prisons. Nick is a new caller to LBC from Cardiff. Evening, Nick.
Hi, evening. How are you, Simon?
I'm very well. Welcome to LBC. What would you like to tell us about where this all heads?
Honestly, I think I've probably got more to say about prisoners being in prison, like the fact that they're getting overcrowded than I would about the job. I don't think I could provide nearly as much insight as Dan. I think he's obviously got the experience working in the prison service. My main points would be to do with the amount of prisoners that are in there that have reoffended before. I think statistics, something like 50% of prisoners being reoffenders, being second-time visitors, and how much should we be focusing on rehabilitation or trying to prevent people from going to prison rather than putting out fires with regard to staffing?
What do you think are the solutions that the country ought to be looking at? Because one way or another, the size of the prison population, at least short-term, has got to be reduced.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at releases, I think doing it case by case based on public outrage, it's not something that can be sustainable. And it might look like you're trying to do the right thing, but I think it just gives more difficulties when you're not giving everyone the same treatment. But in terms of that long-term goal, education has to be the main one. When you look at about 20% of people who get expelled from school end up in prison, about 40% of people who are in prison alone have been expelled or temporarily shunned away from their school. And we've got indicators of people who are going to be in there. How can we not try and get to them first before they're put in prison? Why are we not putting these kind of resources into preventative measures? We've got such a high arrest and prison population compared to the rest of Europe. We have to try and address the issue at the source.
I was seeing suggestions, I think it was in an editorial today in the Financial Times, where they were saying that for anybody serving sentences of between 6 to 12 months, on the basis that those offenders must have committed relatively minor crimes, rather than locking them up in jail, those cases should actually be dealt with through community service processes that should be much more muscular than the ones that currently exist, modelled on what they've done in the Netherlands, for example. Is that the kind of approach that you think would work if you targeted particularly the lower level offenders sentenced or eligible to be sentenced for much shorter periods of time in jail than obviously much more serious, more violent cases?
Short term, most likely, yeah. I mean, you've got to then allocate resources to the people who have to monitor these people and actually make sure that whether work's being done or they're within the parameters of their release. But when you've got about 30% of people who are released from prison reoffending within 1 year, I'm not sure community measures are going to be robust enough.
And Nick, I'm asking everybody this question tonight. Do you have any confidence that the government is going to, on its current track, achieve its aim of ending this desperate cycle in which we find ourselves?
No. I think the measures such as letting people out on case-by-case basis are way too short-term. I think you have to focus on source such as education.
Nick, thanks very much indeed for calling for the first time. LBC, that's Nick in Cardiff. I hope you will call us again. Many of you have been texting in about the interview that we did at the start of the hour with Mark Fairhurst of the Prison Officers Association. Kate says the government should clearly have Mark Fairhurst as a principal advisor on this issue. Emily says, what an insightful guest. Practical solutions. Shame the government aren't listening to those closest to the issue. Sean has texted in to ask a question. This is Sean in Brighton, to ask a question that I think many of us are asking ourselves. In what world, he asks, can it be acceptable for prison officers to be earning less than half the salary of a train or a tube driver? Nothing against train or tube drivers. They're hugely important too. But in what world, Sean wants to know, is it possible that prison officers could be earning less than half the salary paid to train drivers or tube drivers? By the way, earlier on, I read out a text from Scott who suggested that the government should recruit prison officers from abroad. And it turns out that they are. Visa rules were changed in May of this year to make working as a prison officer exempt from the £41,700 threshold to qualify for a skilled worker visa, because they do indeed, as we heard from Mark Fairhurst, as a starting salary, certainly earn less than that. I think he said the starting salary was $37,000 per annum, so they are exempt from that carve out. They are carved out from those rules and do qualify for a skilled worker visa. So that answers that bit of the conundrum. We'll talk about other elements to this to come, and then after the news at 9 we're going to talk about pubs and this extraordinary suggestion today by Westminster City Council that vertical drinking, not a phrase I'd ever heard before today, vertical drinking should be banned. We'll get to that after the 9 o'clock news, which comes in 12 minutes time.
This is LBC.
Pick up more sun cream. Impromptu picnic. Late night cinema trip. Do more this summer. Hop on and off with the Weekend Hopper. Get unlimited weekend bus and tram journeys for £1.75 per day every Saturday and Sunday from the 25th of July. Plan your journey with the TfL Go app. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters. Offer valid from 4:30am on the 25th of July until 23:59 Monday the 31st of August. Always use the same card or device when touching in. For more information, search TfL Hopper.
Visit thebirthdaydraw.com for a chance to win £1 million. Why should you enter? Hello? £1 million. In fact, the birthday draw is the only weekly draw where you can win £1 million for just £1. Enter before midnight on Sunday from as little as £1 or via post. Is it your lucky day? From Global and ITV. T&Cs apply. 18 plus UK only. No purchase necessary. Verify at thebirthdaydraw.com/verify.
Go all Irish to France with great low prices. With Irish Ferries, you can for less. Irish Ferries. See travel differently. T's and C's apply.
When your daughter's wedding guest list is double-sided, enjoy every hand-clapping second of it. Be a step ahead with Barclays Premier, with our best savings rates. Barclays, backing your future. Eligibility criteria apply. T's and C's apply.
This is LBC with Simon Marks.
Sam has texted the programme to say, why don't they deport some of the foreign criminals? I think there is a certain number of them that they can deport. That would free up space. Well, Sam, that's one of the things that Andy Burnham says that he has told the Ministry of Justice urgently to take a look at. Let's go to Leeds. Mick is on the line from there this evening. Evening, Mick.
Evening, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you tonight?
Not too bad. A bit annoyed about Andy Burnham, really. He's come in on a ticket saying the national infrastructure shouldn't be privatised, and he's trying to build private prisons. Also, he needs to do a root and branch view of the prison service linked to the justice system and the probation service, because there are thousands of prisoners in the prisons that shouldn't be there. Level criminals who should be on community service orders and not in prison cells. People on remand who shouldn't be on remand, as that prison officer said. He has, the availability there to get rid of at least several thousands of people out of our prisons. So just throwing money at new prisons at £600,000 a cell used to work in government procurement, and their government procurement is an absolute disgrace. We used to find out that they were closely linked to get the contracts, because that's just disgraceful, absolutely.
Mick, your phone line is breaking up, but I definitely got the gist of what you were saying there. Thank you very much for coming on the programme tonight. Mick is making a really important point here about government procurement, and it's an issue that Andy Burnham has indicated he wants to address. He wants to keep as much procurement in-house, get it out of the hands of private companies, he says, and certainly keep it in the hands of British business than has taken place before. But there are big questions about how that is going to be implemented. And in the case of this prison building programme, what does that look like? But the procurement issues here, as Mick was suggesting, are absolutely worth exploring. On text, Michael is asking, why are we seriously not having conversations about capital punishment? We cannot hide away from a solution to reduce or deter those who commit heinous crimes against innocent people, pedophiles, mass murderers. Let's have a debate. The cost to our taxpayers, the overcrowding, Michael suggests, in Derbyshire is simply unsustainable. Let's go to Andrew in Croydon. Evening, Andrew.
Hello.
How are you tonight?
I'm interested in this conversation. Although I'm not a prison officer, I've worked with a lot of ex-prison officers because I used to be in UK Border Force. And you think, well, what's that got to do with anything? Well, there's two things that the prison service and UK Border Force and its forerunners have got in common. Is both of them were managed for a while by a guy called Brodie Clark, who destroyed the prison service and then came along and destroyed UK Border Agency, as it was then, later becoming Border Force. And they're also controlled by the Home Office. And there's a lot of Home Office diktat and Home Office style of management and leadership, which is pathetic, really. They'll always choose the wrong option. They'll choose the cheapest option. They just never seem to learn. They won't listen to the people on the ground. They've always got a better idea themselves, and I think that's part of the problem. And I've discussed this with people in other parts of the criminal justice system, such as the law courts and probation officers and police officers, and they all come to the same conclusion. The Home Office doesn't help. The Home Office drags us down. The Home Office dictates things that just don't work, and we have to work with their policies.
So, Andrew, I don't want to talk specifically about Mr. Clark because I have no personal knowledge of his record, and he's not here to defend himself.
Theresa May sacked him.
But in terms of the Home Office, what have they stopped from happening that you would like to see happening, particularly with regard to prison and probation service staffing?
Well, they've stopped any effective recruitment and retention because of okay, they'll blame the actual agencies, but the money's coming from them in many ways. The culture is coming from them, and it's a whole wider civil service thing. It's that there's not enough money. There's not enough money being spent, and it's. And unless some real investment is done and some real leadership is shown, it's never going to change.
But you think this ought to be part of Andy Burnham's war on Whitehall?
Not a war on Whitehall, but let's start identifying the talent and start getting rid of the waste. You know, I don't mean financial waste. I mean the people who just have bad ideas, the people who don't listen to the staff below them, for a start. But, I mean, there's also something else I'd like to say in favour of prison officers. When I heard that a lot of prison officers were coming into my job in Border Force, I thought, oh, God, they're going to be all hang them and flog them. They're going to be all horrible people. And they're absolutely not. They were some of the greatest people I've ever worked with because they had real skills in negotiating with people, with dealing with people, especially angry passengers that we often dealt with. Could talk down people. And they were really decent people. And I thought, this is such a massive loss to the prison service. You know, it's a gain for Border Force, but it was a loss to the prison service because they were losing some of the very, very good, very talented, very hard-working people.
I'm sure, and that's exactly what Mark Fairhurst from the Prison Officers Association was reflecting at the beginning of the programme, and what our caller last night, Sophia, 10-year veteran of the prison service, who called this programme right around now, 24 hours ago, was saying that every day she goes to work and she wonders if she's going at the end of her shift safely to be able to return home. We've got breaking news on the FIFA story we were just talking about. The Confederation of African Football's Executive Committee has tonight unanimously confirmed its support for Gianni Infantino as the head of FIFA. There are 54 member associations within the Confederation of African Football. That's more than a quarter of all the football associations within FIFA. So for Gianni Infantino's hopes of staying on in the job and being re-elected next year, this is a huge shot in the arm. He's going to need at least 106 votes in total, and 54 of them, as of tonight, appear to have been secured already, as I suggested to Kevin Maguire, and he agreed. Gianni Infantino does not look like a man who's going anywhere. We're going to go to Maidenhead, which is where we find Douglas this evening. Evening, Douglas.
Oh, good evening, Simon.
What would you like to say?
Yeah, I was just replying to, you had a text from a caller earlier about using the armed forces.
Yeah, using the army. Amazing. Yeah, we've had lots of texts in that along those lines.
Amazing. For myself, ex-airborne forces, I left 10 years ago. The government had no hesitation to use the armed forces when there's a shortfall of security staff for the London Olympics in 2012. I got drafted in for that. There was the fire service strikes in the early 2000s. I missed that one. But, you've got troops that are trained from Iraq, Afghanistan, from detention facilities out there. Fit guys, they've got security training. If I was still in the army and I was drafted into, to man a prison, I'd go at the drop of a hat.
And do you think that your fellow troops would have felt the same way?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I've done a lot worse. I've been told to do a lot worse than have to work. Getting drafted to work in a prison. You just crack on and do it. You don't get questioned. You don't question getting sent to Afghanistan. You just take it as it's part of the duty. I mean, there would be different sort of brigade, depending on what the brigade cycles are now, but there'll be troops that are freed up. If it was a case of national security, to be honest with you, if it was stopping murderers, not murderers obviously, but those chaps that were convicted of the manslaughter of the police officer, I'd be more than happy to make sure they were secure.
Douglas, that's really interesting input. Thanks very much indeed for calling in. That's Douglas in Maidenhead saying he would, when he was serving in the army, have been perfectly happy to go into the prisons to try and assist with the staffing crisis that they are currently facing. Finish this hour with a text from a listener who doesn't provide a name, but who says, and this takes us back to exactly where we were this time last night, my good friend was almost murdered at work as a prison officer. Why should people risk their lives for an appalling wage? The dangers and staffing are shocking. This is going to be an issue that we will continue coming back to. And for Andy Burnham and his government, it is clearly not going to go away. Thanks for all of your calls on that. Into our final hour together tonight, and we're going to talk about pubs.
Scrap it, whatever you're doing, rip it up and start again.
That is Dom, a pub landlord in Soho here in London, telling Westminster Council where they can stick their plans to try and end vertical drinking. That's drinking standing up, inside or outside a pub, or even ordering a drink at the bar. Number 10 has also weighed in. I'll tell you about that. There are echoes of some of the COVID-19 restrictions in some of these Westminster proposals. Isn't this idea the last thing the hospitality industry needs as communities lose them in record numbers? Or if you live near a pub and you're tired of the crowded streets, the noise, the interrupted sleep, maybe you think we should make pubs a little bit more twee.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, rail passengers across large parts of the UK are facing major disruption until the end of the day due to a power failure. Intercity operators Avanti West Coast and TransPennine Express are among 6 companies affected. Northern's also telling passengers not to travel. The Telegraph's correspondent Simon Calder says the disruption is widespread.
I'm just looking, for instance, at the Manchester Piccadilly Arrivals Board, cancelled trains from Glasgow, from York, from Norwich, from Manchester Airport, of course, difficult if you're trying to get a plane, and from London Euston.
The government's urgently identifying any member of a grooming gang who may still be eligible for early prison release. The Prime Minister is said to have personally intervened to ensure that everything possible is done to stop them being freed. Rapists and serious child sex offenders had been excluded, but some had questioned the scope of the exemptions. 2 police officers have been taken to hospital following a second night of disorder in Thetford. Norfolk police were called to anti-immigration demonstrations yesterday evening. 2 men were arrested after one officer was hit with a rock and another was bitten. Terry Jeremy is the area's MP and has told LBC what caused the unrest.
There have been quite a lot of concerns over the last few weeks about a proposal to turn a local former military base into a centre to process asylum seekers. So there's been quite heightened tensions over the past few weeks. And also a lot of misinformation shared online and in the community at large. So tensions have been running high.
A woman's appeared in court charged with stabbing 4 men in the back with scissors. Police were called to Covent Garden in central London yesterday. The 47-year-old is due back in court next month. UEFA says its boycott of the World Cup still stands despite an apology from FIFA President Gianni Infantino. It says its conditions still haven't been met after controversial plans to sell off a stake in the World Cup were scrapped. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed down 20 points at 10,867. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.16. LBC weather mostly dry with clear spells tonight. Showers in Wales and the northwest with heavier rain for Scotland. Lows of 4 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Simon Marks.
In for Ian Dale for one final hour this evening. Rachel Johnson will be here tomorrow night between 7 and 10, of course. I'll be back in for Ian on Monday of next week. I'm actually here over the weekend. You can catch me on Saturday and Sunday between 3 and 6 if you fancy it. Now, with a little bit of luck, I might just make it back to my manor tonight in time to get a fast pint before last orders at my local. And this hour, we are going to talk about fresh pressure that is being brought to bear on pubs, at least here in one part of London, and if the idea were to catch on, in other parts of the country as well. Westminster City Council is under fire tonight after publishing new draft licensing rules that, if they were enforced, would ban vertical drinking and possibly even ordering a drink at a crowded bar. Vertical drinking means, and I have to say I hadn't heard this before, drinking while you're standing up. I'm keen to know what horizontal drinking looks like, but I don't think it's something any of us should be trying. The council, with echoes of some of the COVID-19 restrictions that were implemented during the pandemic, says it wants to discourage excessive drunkenness and encourage the provision of more seating in premises that serve alcohol. It says drinks should only be ordered via waiter or waitress service, so no more bellying up to the bar for you. It also aims to bring order to the borough's pavements, where on beautiful summer evenings and sometimes at other times of the year, crowds of people absolutely gather engaged in vertical drinking in scenes that I think have become rather iconic in terms of London's hospitality businesses. You see them all the time crowding the pavements all over the city on glorious nights here in the centre of London. The Mayor of London, Sir Sadiq Khan, blasted the idea today. He called it restrictive and anti-growth. Number 10 weighed in this evening with a fantastic statement that I will read you in full. Busy pubs full of people talking to each other are not a public nuisance. It's British life and it's thousands of jobs. The government is devolving new licensing powers to the mayor to help support pubs and nightlife. The statement continues, Soho did not become world famous by taking last orders early and switching the lights off at 10 o'clock. The Prime Minister encourages local leaders to work with the industry so that pubs can continue to thrive. That's the statement from number 10 Downing Street this evening. A little bit earlier, LBC's reporter Joe Draper spoke to Dom, a pub landlord in Soho, who very much echoed the views of Andy Burnham.
Today we're here in Soho. We love pubs and we love standing outside. I think it doesn't just entice people in. I just think it's the whole standing outside, the atmosphere of being inside, but just getting together, the network. And this is people's lifeline. You can't take that away. This is people's lifeline. All of this, people have got to understand pubs is part of culture. It's people's lifeline. You know, we need to get away from this sort of philosophy. I don't agree with it.
What's your message for the council? If you had the council here now, what would you say to them?
Scrap it, whatever you're doing, rip it up and start again and come and speak to me.
I mean, he's right, isn't he? Isn't this the last thing that the hospitality industry needs at a time when pubs are closing at record rates, disappearing from communities, leaving gaps on high streets? Or maybe you live near a pub. Maybe you live above a pub. Maybe you're sick and tired of the noise, the late nights, the inebriated customers, and the disruption all of that brings to your neck of the woods. I'm a huge fan of pubs, even when they're packed and it takes me 30 minutes to get a pint. But are you with number 10 on this, or are you with Westminster City Council? Do you think that there is any benefit, any advantage to the kind of changes in their licensing rules that they are suggesting? And if you own a pub, would love to hear from you tonight about the difficulties that I know so many publicans are encountering as they try to keep their businesses open. Isn't this one of the last ideas that you would possibly want to be hearing at a time of economic challenge? We're going to start our conversation this evening with Tony Devonish, Conservative member of Westminster City Council, who is also a former mayor of the London Assembly. Mr. Devonish, I'm enormously grateful to you for coming on the programme, because I don't think that we have heard at all yet today from a member of Westminster City Council about this idea, which certainly has attracted considerable public attention and, as you will have seen, a real pushback from number 10 Downing Street. Good evening. Tell me from the council's perspective, from your perspective, what's this all about?
Well, this is the ultimate silly season August story. Let me explain it, but let me just start so I can reassure all your listeners that this is a completely nonsense story. There is I repeat, no truth in it at all. Let me tell you what has happened. It's a silly season, and somebody, probably quite junior, in the Mayor of London's office has got together with the Guardian newspaper and literally, and I wouldn't normally accuse Sadiq Khan's office of actually fabricating something, but this time they have absolutely fabricated this story. And what makes it even worse, as we picked this up as Westminster City Council yesterday, and we told them in writing that this is not true. This is a complete fabrication. And the Guardian, for some reason, have still published it. And we have had people, including our excellent deputy leader and cabinet member responsible for this, Councillor Tim Barnes, has been all over the media this afternoon, spelling that out in words of one syllable. So to repeat, we are not going to do this at all. We never said we were. This has been completely fabricated by somebody probably not much further out of university than a few months, perhaps, in Sadiq Khan's team, and somebody in The Guardian has decided to run this. And there is a precedent for this. A few months ago, we had the mayor, because what the mayor is very good at is coming up with what he considers right-wing figures to dislike. And the one he came up with the other month was members of the residents in the similar area in Soho in the West End. And he accused them of always being NIMBYs, always being against licensing policy. And that, again, simply isn't true. Of course, some residents complain about certain pub licences at certain times, but the idea that this is some kind of mass NIMBY issue, again, wasn't true. So what Sadiq has always been good at, and I know this because I spent 8 years at the London Assembly scrutinising him, he's very good at producing a right-wing hate figure for his own press, usually actually The Guardian or the Daily Mirror. But this is actually, in all my years of scrutinising Sadiq, in a decade of following his every move, I have never seen a more fabricated story. Usually, it's an opinion. My opinion can be different from Sadiq and his team, but this case is absolutely nonsense. It's a complete work of fiction, and we are taking this up all the ways you'd expect us to do. But I just repeat, The Guardian and Mr. Khan's office have lied.
OK, but I'm looking on the Westminster City Council website at a consultation document where some of these ideas are floated in black and white. The introduction of measures to reduce the extent of or to remove opportunities for vertical drinking could address the underlying reasons for the policy. This could be by introducing fixed seating and conditions to provide a minimum number of seats at all times and requiring sales to be by waiter or waitress service only. What's that about if this is a complete fabrication?
It's a very, very complex public consultation that has to be done under the laws of the country. And it's a document, licensing policy in this country is hugely regulated, quite rightly, and to do with legal precedent. And I'm not a licensing lawyer. There are people that are paid millions of pounds to do this, literally, over a period of time. It's a very specialist area. But these policies are consulted on by the industry on a regular basis. But the reality is the way it's been spun by the mayor, and the main spun in by the mayor, is that we will ban, as you say, people standing at pubs, is absolute nonsense.
Well, but that appears to fly in the face, Mr. Devonish, of the text in this consultation. I mean, it's floating the possibility, as The Guardian certainly has reported today, and they've talked about this being a consultative process. It's floating the possibility of removing opportunities for vertical drinking and introducing fixed seatings and conditions to provide a minimum number of seats at all times, and requiring sales to be by waiter or waitress service only. That would preclude the possibility of someone standing up at the bar and trying to get the barman's attention to get a pint.
It would be if that's what it actually said.
Well, I'm looking at it now. I'm looking at it in black and white. That's what it says.
No. Look, you and I are not experts in licensing. I have been advised by the Deputy Leader of the City Council in writing by the man who is responsible for licensing policy, Councillor Tim Barnes, who has consulted with officers today, that is not a correct legal interpretation. And this discussion was had with the Guardian newspaper, and we have put this in writing to the Guardian newspaper before they published, and they have decided to interpret it in the way that you, and I'm not criticising you in any way, I've always sat, by the way, as a councillor on planning. You tend to either sit on planning or you sit on licensing during your career as a councillor, and I've always done planning, and they are very different. So I'm not saying I can argue every single comma and dot, but I have been 100% reassured that it is not what the Guardian says. It is what I am saying. This is a fabricated story for a silly season time of year when we have actually had the discussion. What you do normally in media, as you know, because you're a journalist, sir, is you go back to the source of the story, in this case, Westminster Council. They put their side of it. And even if the Guardian thought their interpretation was right, all they would have to do, which is normal process that you would agree with, I'm sure, is put what the Westminster Council response is and then publish the story. They did not put our response, although it delivered to them in writing long before the story was published.
So let me just so that
the agenda comes from the mayor's office.
But the agenda is fueled by section D171 in Article 5 of this consultation document. The Guardian's not making that up. It says it in black and white that that's one of the things. So are you saying that this consultation process is essentially over before it's begun, and that there are no circumstances in which what is floated in this document in black and white would actually be implemented?
What I'm saying is vertical drinking is not being outlawed in any way.
And what about fixed closing times? What about this notion of a forced 10 p.m. last order, 10 p.m. Closing time?
I couldn't give you a direct answer on that because, as I say, I'm not a licensing expert and I haven't. The main story that's been spun is the former one, that we're not banning vertical drinking. The reality is this is a legal process we have to go through to a public consultation, and then all the views are taken into account. Some of them go forward, as you know, in public consultations. Many of them don't. It's not for me to say to answer the latter part of your question, I'm afraid. But I can guarantee say that there's no chance that we are banning people standing up in pubs. And the silly season story that has been blown up by the Guardian and the Mayor's office, which is, you're right, is all over the media. It's the biggest silly season story I can remember in a long time. So I've been reassuring people all afternoon about this, as have my colleagues. But the reality is, I will repeat, There is no circumstances whatsoever, ever, that we will be banning vertical drinking.
And so let me put to you what section D173 of this document says. The council also considers that a prescribed maximum capacity alongside a minimum level of seating and tables can assist in promoting the prevention of public nuisance licensing objectives. And then it goes on to say that premises that are less crowded and where customers are seated are generally associated with lower noise levels and more orderly dispersal than higher capacity venues with predominantly vertical drinking. I mean, I'd never heard of vertical drinking before, but measures to control it are all over this consultative document.
Well, there already are measures in current licensing regulation to do just that. And the people that actually object to more licensing, both in Westminster and across the country, quite rightly, are normally the police. And the person who's democratically responsible for the accountability of the police in London is one Sadiq Khan. So he seems to be trying to build his whole case on something that people that are responsible normally for opposing license application are normally the police. He seems to be trying to say it is residents, or now he's trying to say it's Westminster Council. It is neither. The factual answer is it's always mainly the police, which, again, I'm not saying is wrong. I'm just giving you that as a fact. But the reality is we are not trying to ban anything. This is a silly season story that was rebutted before it was issued by The Guardian. And this is shoddy journalism from The Guardian. And I can show you we're taking that up with The Guardian. But this is Mr. Mayor, Mr. Sadiq Khan, as often, because what he's very good at is picking targets and then trying to make his political points.
Do you think the council should consider removing this consultative document, scrapping it?
I would leave that to the deputy leader to answer, because he's got all the facts. I'm standing at a railway line in London, having been out meeting some of my residents as a local councillor. I haven't got the document in front of me, and I'm not responsible for that. But I'm sure Councillor Tim Barnes will be taking into account all the feedback, both in the legal document that will come in, but also clearly the feedback that's come in through misinformation from Mr. Khan and The Guardian today.
Tony Devonish, Conservative member of Westminster City Council, also a former member of the London Assembly. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme tonight. And as I say, I think there is a real contradiction here, because there is a document on the Westminster City Council planning website, and it does absolutely suggest that the council wants to engage in consultation over some of these ideas that Mr. Devonish there insisted time and again are simply a silly season story that has been, he says, completely mischaracterised by the Mayor of London, and therefore also by Number 10 Downing Street and The Guardian newspaper. We will find out in a moment what the managing director of one of the country's largest brewery chains thinks of all of this. And I want to take your calls. If you are a pub landlord, whether you're in London or whether you're outside London, life's hard enough, isn't it, without these kind of ideas being floated and discussed. And again, to be clear, I'm reading them directly off the consultative document that is on the Westminster Council planning website. We'll come back with more on this in just a moment here on LBC. Simon Marks in for Ian Dale. It's 21 minutes past 9.
Ben Kentish from 10 p.m.
As Andy Burnham announces 160 new mental health centres will open across the country. What most helped you when you were struggling? Your calls on that to come, plus details of a major new immigration announcement from the Tories, and fury today after Westminster Council launches a crackdown on people standing up in pubs. The Prime Minister says it's an attack on the British way of life. But what do you think?
Ben Kentish from 10 p.m. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Tackles that crunch and theatrical diving, rivals on terraces sobbing and crying, last minute winners that change everything. These are a few of our favourite things. When you're singing yet not winning, when your bet's gone bad, we simply remember our favourite things, and then we'll feel
For all your favourite things, visit BetVictor. 18 plus gambleaware.org. Please gamble responsibly.
Honestly, I've been putting MTD off. First it was, I'll do it after this job. Then, after some grouting. After sorting the back of the van. After fish fingers and peas. And then I thought, no, just get it done.
Get MTD done simply with Sage for free. Just connect to your bank, we'll sort your transactions, then submit your update to HMRC. Search Sage MTD.
Take summer by storm with Kia. Introducing the new Kia Sportage Storm, a unique limited edition of the UK's favourite family SUV. Test drive the award-winning Kia Sportage today and order yours by the 31st of August to get 5.9% APR representative and up to £3,000 PCP finance deposit contribution. Search Kia Takes Summer by Storm. Kia. Movement that inspires. T's and C's apply. Kia Finance. To verify, visit kia.com/UK/favourite.
Simon Marks on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Sarah says that she's disgusted with me because she says that licensing document has been the same for 10 years. I mean, just to be clear about the document that I am reading, it is the draft statement of licensing policy issued by Westminster City Council in June of 2026. It is described as a new licensing strategy that sets out the council's vision and its strategic aims. And indeed, the introduction to the policy by Councillor Tim Barnes, the Cabinet Member for Growth and Planning on Westminster City Council, makes it absolutely clear that there has been an evolution in the council's approach to the licensing of pubs. It says that the council has longer-term ambitions. We want to enable businesses to thrive with the flexibility to adapt their operations as demand changes. And it goes on to say that it intends to take a more adaptive approach to policy development that may involve more frequent policy reviews. So, I mean, I am not an expert on Westminster Council planning, but certainly the website presents this as a new licensing framework. Let's go to my next guest this evening, Hayden Misen, Joint Managing Director of the almost 200-year-old pub and brewery chain McMullen's, which owns more than 100 pubs. Mr. Misen, thanks for being with us and thanks for being so patient while we spoke there with Councillor Tony Devonish from Westminster City Council. Is this silly season stuff, or do you think this is a serious set of proposals that Westminster has floated and is perhaps now embarrassed about having floated? Good evening to you.
Good evening. There is absolutely a chance that some of this could be the intent that is intended. So we have a pub in Covent Garden that does, under Westminster, have a licence that permits drinking only when sat down and served with full table service. So that was probably bought out about 7 or 8 years ago. But there is definitely, Westminster Council is our trickiest place to operate with the strictest rules on licensing. And there is no reason to believe that there won't be some whose intent is within that document. That's not to say it's guaranteed or that it will happen, but there's absolutely every chance that there will be people within that group who would like that to be the case.
Well, I mean, it's a consultative document and it's floating a variety of different proposals and seeking public response to them. And, you know, at a time when devolution is in vogue, one would imagine that if there was a plurality of people in Westminster that thought it was a good idea to ban, quote-unquote, vertical drinking while standing up, you know, the council might definitely consider the idea of implementing that kind of a ban. And you say there's already one pub where you are constrained in Covent Garden over what you can do.
Absolutely. We'd definitely fly in the face of recent announcements by the new Prime Minister. We had him in one of our pubs just last week announcing the business rate review in a pub called The Hare in Harlow, which was lovely to host him. But there is one other thing that I would caution is anything like this went ahead, the capacity in every pub is dictated by the floor area and whether guests are standing or seating. If people are standing, they have 0.3 square meters per person. That's how you determine your capacity. As soon as they're sat down, you reduce that by 70%. So if every pub went completely from vertical to seated service, you would instantly reduce by 70% the number of people in those pubs in the most extreme cases.
And what would happen outside on the pavements?
We are very strictly policed and controlled with very tight licensing conditions outside every pub that will be individual. Some pubs we can stand outside, some pubs we can't. Almost all of them have a very tight curtilage. I would imagine that would be managed in the same way. So once that area is full, you would just have less guests in the pubs. But it's very hard to get a new licence in Westminster. And so you would actually have more demand than supply, which can't be a good thing. Not for such a vibrant part of the city, and for something that is generating tax, generating jobs, and probably the biggest contributor to reducing loneliness. So there's no doubt that nobody wins if this was to happen.
And can I ask you, Mr. Misen, outside London and more broadly the national picture, for owners and operators of pubs? I mean, this is clearly a very difficult time economically. We've seen record numbers of pubs disappearing from high streets and communities over the last several years. Any kind of additional restrictions on licensing would presumably only hasten the day when more of that happens.
It just reduces jobs, it reduces tax, it does not really benefit anyone. It would just be folly. But licensing is strict, it's tight, it's well managed. It is a tiger with teeth. There is you have to work with the local authorities. It works well. There is no need to make it any more difficult.
And can I ask you about, there will be people out there who live above pubs, who live close to pubs, who might be sympathetic to the idea that the crowds of people in the summertime outside, late into the evening, the boisterous behaviour. I mean, I was walking past a pub, while the World Cup was on, and obviously packed to the gunnels with people having a fabulous time inside, but it's perfectly possible that neighbours in the area were getting disturbed by some of the noise that was emanating from the pubs. What kind of approach to neighbourhoods do pub landlords generally have?
You have to be a good neighbour. It has to work. And actually, most frequently, the people who use your pub the most will be the people who live nearest. So I live next to a farm. This morning, the whole house and car was covered in corn dust. A few weeks ago, it smelt like cows. So I moved next to a farm. That's what I live with. But I'm sure if I have any issues with the farmer, I'll chat to him and we will almost always be able to find a compromise. It's exactly the same above a pub. Pubs have been around for hundreds of years with people living very near them. If you live next to one, you're going to hear it more than if you live a few yards down the road. But pubs only work if they're good neighbours. And the licensing and the planning restrictions imposed help make sure that absolutely happens.
Hayden Misen, thanks very much indeed for talking to us this evening, and again for being so patient and waiting to come on. He's the Joint Managing Director of the almost 200-year-old pub and brewery chain McMullen's, which owns more than 100 pubs. So now over to you. Look, I can't speak to the detail of this Westminster Council situation. There is clearly a standoff tonight between Westminster City Council on the one hand and Sir Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, and now number 10 Downing Street, over elements that appear to be contained within the consultative document that Westminster City Council has published over the licensing of pubs. But more broadly, if you're in the pub trade, how difficult is it these days? And how little pressure would it take in terms of changing licensing arrangements for your pub to put you over the edge, to put you out of business? Call me at 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. Coming up after the news, the Environment Agency has discovered that only 1 in every 7 of England's rivers, lakes and coastal waters are deemed to be in a good ecological state, and I'm going to be joined live on the programme by the water campaigner Fergal Sharkey. That's coming up right after the news headlines, which come now here on LBC at 29 minutes to 10 from Daryl Jackson.
Rail passengers have been left stranded or looking for other ways home after major disruption to trains across northwest England. Network Rail's blamed a power outage that caused a signal failure in Manchester this afternoon. The government's urgently identifying any member of a grooming gang who may still be eligible for early prison release. The Prime Minister's said to have personally intervened to ensure that everything possible is done to stop them being freed. And UEFA says its boycott of the World Cup still stands despite an apology from FIFA President Gianni Infantino. It says its conditions still haven't been met after controversial plans to sell off stakes in the World Cup were scrapped. LBC weather. Mostly dry with clear spells tonight. Showers in Wales and the northwest with heavier rain for Scotland, a low of 4 degrees.
LBC.
You know that feeling when you're out, something cool happens and you just have to capture it. The new Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 8 gets it. Thanks to its new wide design, content looks and feels so much better. Unfold it for a massive cinematic screen. Close it for perfect reels on the go. No cropping, no missing bits. Just content exactly as it was meant to be seen. Pre-order the new Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 8 on EE for only £54 per month, increasing to £56.50 March 2027, then £59 March 2028. Airtime plan and 48-month device credit agreement required. Subject to status, 18+, credit provided by EE Limited.
Gold Bank London, a safe and sound way to buy and sell gold.
Start your journey in gold today.
Visit goldbank.co.uk.
When you're smiling, the whole world smiles with you.
Life feels better with a smile. Banning Dental Group Clinics. Modern, comfortable and affordable dentistry for all. See online for our price match promise. Keep on smiling.
Keep on smiling, keep on smiling, and the whole world smiles with you.
banningdental.co.uk.
A message from TfL for drivers and motorcyclists. Before you turn, look around. Is there a cyclist in your path or approaching behind you? You now need to always let them pass before you turn. Follow the highway code to keep everyone safe. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Simon Marks on LBC. Text 84850.
Text of the night comes from Robert in Lewisham, who says, I used to go to a pub called the Vertical Drinking Club in the 1980s in the Elephant and Castle. He says it's no longer there, I believe. I've had a quick Google search. I can find no evidence of its current existence, Robert. I really hope it was there back in the 1980s, because what a great name on this particular evening. We're going to come back to more of your calls about this extraordinary standoff that's developing between Westminster City Council on the one hand and Sir Sadiq Khan and number 10 Downing Street now on the other over the future arrangements that should be permissible in pubs within Westminster City Council's area. We'll get back to that in a moment. But first, there was some stunning news today, yet again, about the health of England's rivers, lakes and coastal waters. Every single one of them is officially polluted with chemicals. That's the result of the first comprehensive assessment in 6 years, and it shows that not a single waterway anywhere in England passes a regulator's test for the presence of chemical pollution. The Environment Agency says that heavy metals and so-called forever chemicals are building up, with only 15% of rivers classified as good and 7% of the country's lakes. Joining me now live here on LBC, an old friend of LBC's and a passionate advocate for getting all of this sorted out. I refer, of course, to the water campaigner, Fergal Sharkey, singer-songwriter, also known as the frontman of the punk band The Undertones. Fergal, it's great to have you back on LBC this evening. Thanks so much for being with us.
As always, Simon, the pleasure's all mine.
I mean, it's sort of hard. I feel like there's a wash, rinse, repeat element to this because, you know, you read this report and you just discover that for all the attention that you've given to this issue, nothing's changed. It must be intensely frustrating.
It is now just becoming nothing more than a cacophony of failure and a symphony of incompetence on behalf of the Environment Agency. The reason I say that, Simon, the law here was changed in 2003. By next year, by 2027, the original legislation said every pond, every lake, every river, every stream had to be a good ecological condition, i.e. healthy, wide range of flora and fauna, species, fish, birds, habitat, all that good stuff. The agency put in charge of ensuring that happened 23 years ago was the Environment Agency. And here we are. It was I think 25% of rivers in 2009. That dropped to 17, that dropped to 16, and here we are now, it's down to 14. In all honesty, if the board of that organisation knew anything about honour or chivalry or accountability, every one of them should resign first thing tomorrow morning and hang their heads in shame. It's an utter disgrace.
So I see that these forever chemicals, these so-called forever chemicals, I mean, many of them are coming from farm runoff and sewage. Is that right?
Yeah. The honest truth is, all of the legislation to stop all of this is there, has been there for decades. All of the power and authority to deal with this is there. Farming and the water industry through sewage are generically responsible for about 80% of all pollution in England's rivers. And what an extraordinary thing it is that you and I can sit here, go, only 14% of our rivers are in good ecological condition, and every single river in the country is polluted. It's an insane thing to be able to say. The people responsible for this, and for me, that's the board of the Environment Agency. Quite frankly, I think they should all be under investigation right now for misconduct in public life. We put our trust in the system. We delegate them to look after these things on our behalf. They spend, in terms of the Environment Agency, £3 billion a year or thereabouts. Quite frankly, I would like a refund for my bit of that money.
Now, the Environment Secretary Angela Eagle said today that the results underlined the need for wholesale change across the water sector. Our local communities deserve to have clean local rivers and lakes. She said, we've already introduced landmark legislation to hold water companies to account, secured record investment to help fix infrastructure, and are laser focused on long-term reforms that will prevent future failures. Are we finally going to see some laser-focused action?
Well, let me help with this. That whole sort of legislation thing that the Secretary of State was referring to, that included things like the bonus ban. And as we know, that's been a complete farce. People have now just doubled their salaries and paid themselves by offshore companies. When it comes to actually doing anything about any of this, nothing much has changed. It's all been performative politics. But here's the interesting bit. The Secretary of State, Angela Eagle, could fix all of this tomorrow with nothing more than a stroke of a pen. She could replace the board of the Environment Agency tomorrow and then order them through the statutory guidance to get out there and enforce the law, the current legislation, and enforce it with enthusiasm, vigour, determination and ambition. Stroke of a pen. That's all she has to do. I note she didn't do that today.
You got any confidence that she'll do it tomorrow?
I'm deeply troubled that probably won't. We'll just hear more of the same old performative politics. We're doing things, and yet nothing changes. And actually, as we've noticed, it gets worse. It doesn't get better. My question becomes, how bad does it actually have to get before the government intervene and start demanding retribution and start turning this thing around?
Can I ask you a question relating to the drought conditions that exist across such a large portion of England and the whole of Wales? Because we've spent a lot of time this week on this programme talking about food insecurity and issues pertaining to the drought. The industry group British Water want to pull more water from the ground, from rivers and lakes, after the driest July on record. They say rules restricting abstraction should be relaxed in drought-impacted summers. I can hear from your reaction even to the beginning of that question that you don't think that's a good idea.
I can tell you right now, they may want to go and read the Environment Agency's latest report into this whole idea. London in the southeast right now is now on the cusp of physically running out of water. London is now number 9 on the list of global cities most likely to run out of water. London's now on a list with the likes of Cape Town, Jakarta, Sao Paulo and Mexico City. Behind it all, Thames Water introduced a hosepipe ban 10 days ago, and in those 10 days, they have leaked over 5 billion litres of water from their underinvested, badly maintained, creaky old networks of pipes. The water industry should look to themselves before they decide to exploit and destroy our rivers any further.
And it is worth reminding people, and we've spoken about this here on LBC as well in the past, that by the year 2050, without any kind of emergency action being taken, if we carry on the way that we're going, every single day, this country will be 5 billion litres short of water. I mean, I'm hoping still to be knocking around in 2050. You'll still be a young man in 2050. It's right round the corner.
I recently read that the bit of North London that I live in has about 10 years' worth of water left. North London is on the verge of physically running out of water. 25 million people, as you just highlighted, that 5 billion litres of water a day, which we need to find. That's about getting on for almost 40% more water than we currently have available. Yet the water industry still leaks over 1 trillion litres of water per year from their underinvested, badly maintained, cracked old network of pipes. The water industry needs to go and get itself organised and get itself sorted out before it starts pointing the finger at consumers. It's an outrage that we're sitting here now with hosepipe bans, domestic restrictions, and yet Thames Water is still leaking 5 billion litres of water over the last 10 days. That's insanity.
If I was Angela Eagle or if I were Andy Burnham and I was just coming into these positions, you'd be the first person I'd be calling. Have they called you?
Well, let me put it this way. One of the greatest undertone songs personally ever written was a little song called You've Got My Number, Why Don't You Use It?
Well, I know that we're going to carry on using it here on LBC. Fergal Sharkey, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I wish you courage as you move forward with this campaign, because I fear that you're going to need a lot more of it. Thanks so much for being with us here on LBC tonight. The indefatigable campaigner on this issue of the urgent need to clean up our waterways, Fergal Sharkey. Coming up, we're going to take your calls on this standoff, this row between Westminster City Council and the Mayor of London, Sir Sadiq Khan, and Andy Burnham, the Prime Minister, over pub licensing and possible changes to the rules that are certainly mooted in a Westminster City Council planning document, although Councillor Tony Devonish insisted tonight was fake news. It was all silly season nonsense. We'll come to your calls in just a moment here on LBC. It's coming up to 9:45.
Coming up at 10. Ben Kentish, leading Britain's conversation. Next on LBC.
Imagine you in a nice comfy seat, with your hands behind your head, taking in the views, instead of taking on the road, maybe even taking a nap. That's the bliss of getting where you need to go without worrying about driving. Book your train journey via avantiwestcoast.co.uk and we'll take you there. Avanti West Coast. Feel good travel.
Disco fever has taken dance floors by storm.
Girl power is taking over the charts.
Will the smartphone revolutionize the world?
A lot has changed over the past 5 decades, but one thing that hasn't changed is what makes a great casino. And being backed by over 50 years of Las Vegas heritage, we should know. BetMGM Casino, the real deal. 18 plus, please gamble responsibly.
Take summer by storm with Kia. Introducing the new Kia Sportage Storm, a unique limited edition of the UK's favourite family SUV. Test drive the award-winning Kia Sportage today and order yours by the 31st of August to get 5.9% APR representative and up to £3,000 PCP finance deposit contribution. Search Kia Take Summer by Storm.
Kia. Movement that inspires.
T's and C's apply. Kia Finance. To verify, visit kia.com/UK/favourite.
This is LBC with Simon Marks.
Right, let's get to your calls about pubs. Jason is in Marylebone, right here in London. Jason, good evening.
Good evening. I'm seriously concerned about EastEnders, really. Because what's going to happen in the Queen Vic at Christmas? I mean,
or the Rovers return.
Well, I don't watch that.
Although that
and the best fights happen when everyone's standing in the Queen Vic. And can you imagine them walking in and saying, "Please take a seat," and then the waitress comes? It's just not going to work.
I mean, no one would ever get a drink if you weren't able to go up to the bar, certainly at my local, and actually order a pint.
And if you just think about this logically, I mean, the fact that the pubs would have to employ way more staff and get way less, and they'd have half the customers. So if they're struggling now to make money, they're going to close. It's impossible. You can't. It just takes me back to you can only have a pint if you're having a meal. So then we were giving people a pint with a sausage roll, but with a knife and fork. You know, it's just so illogical. It's just laughable. But I found it interesting when you were talking to the guy from the city, from Westminster.
Yes.
And he was just flat denying it. But yet you're literally quoting from their own website. And he's like, just brushing over that. But that's on their website. So where this story's come from somewhere, and it's come from their website.
Well, the story has come from the consultative document that they published back in June. Why it's only just being reported, I'm not sure. But that. I mean, I was reading the quotes off that document that is very much an active consultation, as I understand it, and is very much still on their planning department's website. Now, you know, it's perfectly possible that the council, I suppose, has decided that they've already moved past these ideas and that the consultation perhaps isn't as serious a consultation as they've suggested. We've had other listeners saying, well, a lot of this stuff has been part of the licensing code for 10 years. But that's not the way the consultation is presented. It's presented as a new approach to licensing laws. And, I mean, the key issue here is that, as you have identified, if you do away with vertical drinking, if you make everybody sit down at tables and chairs, as we heard from Mr. Meisen from Macmullen's pubs, that is going to reduce the number of people that you can possibly have in a pub. You're going to need more staff to serve them, and it's going to have economic consequences on what, I don't know about you, Jason, I think is a hugely important sector of our economy and our community.
It makes the community tick. It's so important. And look, don't get me wrong. I sometimes I'm working very late in around the Soho area. We've got a creperie outside the London Palladium on Argyle Street, and sometimes you walk down there at 1-2 o'clock in the morning, and it's not the most pleasant place, seeing people basically throwing up in corridors and stuff like that, and urinating everywhere. But it's part of London. That's part of what London is all about, and it's part of Soho. And if you take that out of Soho, you take the heartbeat, and then Soho just disappears. What does it become? So it's just the conversation is kind of ludicrous, because it's just so ridiculous that you just going to have people seating in pubs, and it's the Westminster. I'm so aggravated with it. They seem to just be anti-business, and you know we have a A-board outside our business, and all the A-board does is promote what we're selling, and all they want to do is fine me for having an A-board. Yet you go a few metres down the road, and there is literally 100 line bikes just thrown on the pavement, and nobody can walk on the pavement to go past these line bikes. But that's fine. But an A-board is, that's terrible. You can't have an A-board. You know, they're so illogical. It's unbelievable.
And there is obviously very bad blood between Westminster City Council and Sir Sadiq Khan.
I mean, that came out tonight, didn't it? I mean, I was laughing. I was literally just laughing, listening to the way he was talking about Sadiq Khan. There's a lot of bad blood between me and Sadiq Khan as well, so I'm not a fan. But I feel like the pair of them together, I'm just not sure if they've got a clue what they're actually doing. I don't know what their purpose, what they're trying to bring out of London, because I know London is a great city, and I speak to tourists every single day. And I just think to myself, like, we've got such amazing things here and such amazing opportunities, and there's people above us that kind of just want to ruin that and take the essence away.
I'm going to give you a social media tip, Jason, but only because you own a creperie. You know the actress Minnie Driver?
Yeah, of course.
Have a look at her social media feed, because she's been in Paris. I think she's starring in a film there. I think she's filming a feature there. Yeah. And she had a day off yesterday, and she went out in Paris and she bought herself a crepe. And she did this lovely little Instagram post about everybody needs to eat more crepes. I think you could completely use it in marketing material.
Rachel Zegler did that for us last year when she was there, when she took over the Palladium.
Well, there you go. You see, not everyone's anti-business.
No, there you go.
Jason, thanks so much for calling in. That's Jason in Marylebone. Let's go to Wembley. Courtney is there. Evening, Wembley. Evening, Courtney.
How you doing, mate? All right?
I'm all right, thanks. How are you?
Good. Listen, you sound just like, you know, you should be in government, because everything that's going on is, common sense to me. If you run a business and you want to know about a business, don't talk to people at the top. You talk to people in the bottom.
Absolutely.
Right? And the people everybody you've been talking about, every topic you've been talking about, everybody's arguing their point, and they're arguing it very well, right? But that's what matters. And if you put it right back, it goes to the guy standing in the pub. Because without the guy standing in the pub, you ain't got the people at the top, right? So there's too many people at the top concerned about themselves, not realising that the people standing in the pub makes them where they are today or where they are up top. So it's a balance in between everything we're talking about. Everything. It's how you argue your point with the amount of money we have in our hand to deal and make everybody happy.
It's such a great point, Courtney. I don't know how much of the programme you've listened to, but we had earlier on the head of the Prison Officers Association talking about the crisis in staffing in prisons. And several of our listeners were texting in and saying the government needs to be talking to him. He needs to be an advisor to the government on this. We've just spoken to Fergal Sharkey about water and the pollution of our waterways. And again, it seems extraordinary to me that the government hasn't called him, given the incredible work that he's done on this issue. And now with this issue of pubs, I mean, this is a consultative document that Westminster City Council has put out. You could go and fill it in. Anybody can go and fill it in. But you're absolutely right. This need actually to talk to people who are at the sharp end of these issues is vital across the board, isn't it?
And that's what I thought the House of Lords was all about. You know, people get appointed because they're advisors within the industry. Yeah, and, you know, I would own your radio station if I was the government, but I wouldn't let anybody know that I owned it because I'm getting all this. Yeah, which is common sense, but it doesn't seem like the common sense is upstairs making everything we need to live by.
Absolutely. Courtney, thanks for calling in. That's Courtney in Wembley. Joseph has texted in to say, on a different level, this conversation that you're having right now is just a tip of the iceberg of what might happen if Andy Burnham truly achieves devolution of power across the country, to councils everywhere coming up with rules and regulations for their own local businesses and their own local communities, and the effect on them. We have to be very careful that this devolution of power doesn't end up with a complete level of bureaucracy, argues Joseph. He says it could make things more complicated and more expensive and harder to survive if you're operating a business. I mean, of course, local councils all over the country already have considerable power to determine rules and regulations for licensing pubs, for example. But it is an interesting point to connect this with the idea of devolution of power. Let's talk to Taryn in Hounslow. Evening, Taryn. How are you tonight?
Good evening, Simon. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm all right. Thank you very much. Tell me about your experience. You used to own a pub, right?
Yeah, I used to own 5 pubs, and eventually I was forced out of the industry about 6 months ago. Basically, to do with licensing and policing issues, all been forced to the pub owner to rule the community. So, end of the day, we can't spend time on administration and licensing issues every other week because of the social issues.
Do you mean that it just became economically impossible for you because the burdens were so onerous, or it was simply you just couldn't spend your time dealing with it? You just lost patience.
Yeah, lost patience and lost the margin as well. After pandemic, we were losing the customers and the culture changed. But the licensing officers putting all the social issues for us to rule the village. And we can't put the seating outside. You had to spend more money to put the seating, and the paperwork became very difficult, especially after pandemic. I completely gave up everything and to walk away from it.
And what happened to those 5 pubs? Are they still open?
No, 4 pubs, 3 pubs closed down. The other pubs, I own the freehold, which I managed to rent it. I don't know how long they are going to last.
And in the communities that you were serving, the 3 pubs that have closed, what do you think those communities have lost as a result of their closure?
I think it's a tradition and the culture. You know, this standing up and drinking and everything is It's a culture of the country, I believe. And you can't change the culture. It has to leave it to the business person to do the best decision within the rules of law of the country. You can't force everything.
And I'm assuming that were the pubs in the Hounslow area?
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that in the Hounslow area they were not obviously as rammed and busy as the pubs in the centre of London would be, but vertical drinking. I mean, that's part of the culture of the pub experience, isn't it? I mean, I may go to the pub on the way home tonight, and I'll either stand or sit at the bar and have a beer. I mean, that's what you do.
Exactly. That's the culture. They want to have a quick drink or standing up and watching a match and shouting and screaming. That's part of the culture of the pub. You can't change it.
And what do you think about these other ideas regarding the requirement for more seats in pubs and for waiter and waitress services?
Then it's not a pub.
Servers. Go ahead.
Then it's a restaurant. It's not a pub. It's a gastropub. It's a different concept at all. It's going to a different territory. It's not a pub. Pub is a public area where people feel relaxed. They have a pool table. They have darts. They have mess around. They can walk. Otherwise, it's a restaurant. It's not a pub anymore.
What kind of business are you in now that you're out of the pub trade, Taryn, if I can ask?
Yeah, I'm an investor, so I'm doing some legal and accountancy work. So I moved out of F&B, food and beverages. I completely moved out because of the legislations and licensing issues.
What a shame. Do you miss it?
I miss it too much, yes.
Well, I'm sorry that the industry lost you, Taryn, but I'm very grateful to you for calling in tonight. That's Taryn in Hounslow, owner of a pub until 9 months ago, but he gave it up after 16 years, owner of 5 pubs, in fact, and he gave them up after 16 years because he just found that he couldn't spend as much time as he needed to spend on all of the licensing and registration issues that he was forced to deal with. We will end this evening with a text from Archie in Inverness. I'm a vertical drinker, Simon, he says, and I'm routinely discriminated against. Many assumptions are made about me that are absolutely spurious. I stand at the bar and I pay cash, Archie, because I have no smartphone and can't access apps. I drink quickly but not for long, and if I sit down I have problems getting up again as my legs get stiff very quickly. People who complain about folks like me are usually jealous types. Well, Archie in Inverness, all power to you. Continue with your vertical drinking, and I might even do the same thing myself later this evening. That's it for me. Thanks for all your calls and messages tonight. I'm back on Saturday at 3 and again on Sunday. Oh, and I'm back with Tom tomorrow with American Week at 10 to 6, so don't miss that. All the catch-up services are available to you. At 1, it's Clive Bull here on LBC, but next, it's Ben Kentish.
It's more horizontal when you're drinking, Simon.
Exactly.
Hello there. A very, very good evening to you. Thank you, Simon. Welcome to Late Nights with Ben Kentish here on LBC tonight.
Whether you are living in an affluent part of a big city like London or Birmingham, or you're in a much more rural community, hopefully the care that you need for you is there on your doorstep.
A big announcement from the Conservative Party in the last few minutes. If they get back into power after next general election, they are going to stop people who aren't British citizens being able to live in social homes in this country, including the people already living in them. So if you've lived here maybe for decades, you're working, possibly you're paying taxes, but you don't have British citizenship, the Conservatives will give you 6 months to move out.